Topic one: Megan Rapinoe, a famous U.S. soccer player, pushed back against NBA player Draymond Green when he remarked that women athletes should stop complaining about the pay gap that exists in their field. While this issue is a divisive one, should it be an issue that the public cares about? The pay of elite athletes in no way affects working and middle class women, so why should anyone else be concerned with it? A similar issue can be said of actresses. Should the feminist movement ever be focused on what their $1 million pay rates should be? So I came up with this question, and like the this is something that I've seen many times, right? You'll see in the news that someone who's generally makes a million or so dollars, like this happened with the Crown. Do you remember, the show The Crown on Netflix, right? The actress who played the Queen in the first season, she like found out somehow it came out that the guy who played the prince or something, he was being paid more than her, right? And then it was like a big like scandal, right? Then Netflix had like egg on his face. But the point was that like that guy happened to be an actor with like more experience and like more like name recognition and all that. But still, they upped her pay and saying, "Oh, from now on, we'll make sure no one's paid more than the queen." And it's like, all right, girl power, but what does that do for literally anyone else, right? So like in terms of athletes, in terms of movie stars, is this an issue that people should be caring about? So we'll start with Red Charlotte.
Yeah, I think most people in this stream will know I don't give a fuck about rich people and their feelings. But, right, if there is like a way to fix like unfair disparities between people for on the basis of their gender, we should probably fix that. But like fixing it for rich people, as in celebrities, athletes, and like movie stars, is probably at the bottom of the tier list, like the totem pole of priorities for like the pay gap, right? I think we should probably focus more on like working class people. Um, Even though I do understand why they might feel that it's unfair to them.
Okay, Josie.
So when it comes to this issue, I agree. It's like, we start focusing on the larger pay gaps that exist in the, upper echelon of sports and celebrity. However, it is a topic that does need to be discussed because you can't just wash it under the rug. For the fact that, a comparable female actress should be paid the same rate as like a comparable male actor. So I almost said male actress. But if you are going to make that argument, then you also need to also say, well, this may be an issue in this particular point, but we also need to bring it down to like the average common level to make sure those things are done because we can use these things as like shock value. It's like, oh my gosh, this person's pay gap is like insane, millions and millions of dollars. Oh my gosh. And then you bring that back down to like earth.
Mm.
Right? And it's like, well, that is a big pay gap there, but there's also a pay gap on the common things that we look at in the world. So I think it's important to kind of like illustrate that it still exists, but I don't think it's like the thing we need to be focusing on when we talk about pay gap, but is just another factor of the pay gap as a whole.
Fair enough. Thank you. All right, let's go to Melly.
You guys hear me? Am I muted?
You're all good.
Okay, good. So I would have to slightly disagree with Red Charlotte there, because I don't know, I feel as if this has been an ongoing problem, and if we can't get the top like athletes to be respected, then how are we gonna take care of the bottom? Um, we I guess the answer is like why shouldn't we care? Because it's still unequal, and it's still kind of happening right in our faces. So I mean, not doing anything about it is kind of sweeping it under the rug. It's not the way to go, in my opinion.
Lena.
I'm kind of with Charlotte. I kind of like I see it like as a problem, and I understand that like I don't believe that women should be paid less because they're women. Like obviously, I think that's a pretty basic thing to believe, right? But like, do I really care about these people who make millions of dollars every year more than the working class people who make less because of their gender or are fired because of their gender, treated less because of their gender? I'm kind of like, like it's an issue, but is it like really an issue for like me to really like be like, yes, we need to make sure that the millionaires are being paid properly? Like, I don't know. That's my opinion.
Go ahead, Ninetales.
Yeah, so I'm not a good person economics wise to talk about the the wage gap. I just generally don't agree with it. I think when it comes to workers' issues, we can't discriminate because someone's making more money. It's an issue where if you're a worker, if you're working underneath something that's exploiting you, then you deserve workers' rights, and it's you deserve that because you're exploitable, because you're in a vulnerable position. As for female athletes, I feel like uh, the argument could be made, and it's very weak, that like they make less money for the sports teams and entertainment uh, things that cover them. I don't know if that's true. I'm sure some people would say it. On the other hand, I think it probably takes a lot more training and perseverance to maintain. So like overall effort to maintain that physique and that athletic build as much as like say a male athlete would, where testosterone clearly drives that and makes it easier. So I would say, if anything, for like the amount of effort they put in, just to maintain the performance and maintain athleticism and competition, they deserve more money.
All right, open to the panel.
Somebody on my chat brought up a good point, and I've thought about this before, are things like open glass door policies, which are basically like everybody's salaries in the comparable in a corporation are like posted publicly. I think that's a really important thing that can happen, because it allows people to kind of be like, hey, that this person's been there for like 10 years, and it allows it kind of like create that conversation. And one of the things about it is, in America, there's a tradition of being very like reserved about like saying your salary. You can't tell people what you make, right? Because it's like supposed to be like a secret. And a lot of that comes from the patriarchal society of like, oh, don't tell people how much you make, because you don't want people gunning for your job. You don't want people asking for more money on a raise and things of that nature. So the only way we're ever going to really solve the pay gap is if we really do open up the books and figure out where the pay gaps are. That's one of the big problems with this, is like it's really hard to combat because of the idea of like the way private companies withhold that information and keep it so confidential. If there was a more general idea of like, okay, these, at least the ranges, right? Okay, this job pays this much in range wise, this job pays this much range wise, and then that way people can kind of know what they're supposed to be paid, rather than like going in and negotiating for their own raises and salaries. So I think that could be something that would actually solve this issue, because at the end of the day, this is just a black box. We can only assume that people are getting paid less than not. Did I just cut out for a second?
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much one way that I think we can solve this problem.
I think
Yeah,
a good metric for that, it's how much money they're making for their employers.
Go ahead,
Right.
Lena.
sorry. I kind of agree with that. Like, one of the reasons I found out I was getting like screwed over at one of my jobs is because I was training some guy, and I asked him, I'm like, hey, how much you making? Because we're not supposed to, right? He was making more than me, and I was training him, and I'd been there for a year and a half, and then I was like, oh, never mind, I don't like this job anymore. Goodbye. So like, I think that's important too, is like being honest about wages and what people are making, and like a lot of like low skill places. Like, I know we're talking about like specifically like actresses and female sports players and things like that, but like um I know that like a lot of low skill jobs, there's like pay caps. Like, you can make like only $15 an hour, only $20 an hour, and you can't make any more than that in the company. I think that's also a problem. I guess we're kind of going towards minimum wage, or not minimum wage, like general pay gap stuff, but yeah.
I think that's an interesting, what you guys have been saying. I think it's really interesting in terms of having transparency. I never understood why people were so sensitive about money and like letting other people know how much you make. I've never been that sensitive, but other people are. But so the idea, so I think there would be a lot of pushback to Josie's idea about like having a glass door so that everyone sees, right? Even I think if with the thought that you actually might end up making more at the end of it, because now you'll be able to compare and see when things are unfair. But I think that it was really good. In terms of Twitch, right? There is a page, right, for you non-streamers. There's a page that shows how much money I'll like make within like the next month because we get paid monthly. There's a page that shows how much I'll be making, and I cannot show you that page. It's like TOS for me to show you that page. If you see the numbers, then it's a problem for Twitch. And should that be the case? For Twitch especially, I don't even know why. Like, I mean, in terms of different streamers, right? Like, the ability to raise money is like due to your audience, right? Not like your gender. Presumably, I presume that shouldn't be had nothing to do with it. And but I don't know for whatever reason they specifically won't let us talk about that. So, anyway, Johnny,
That's crazy.
Johnny Scarlett, thank you
Hey,
for
what's
being
up?
here.
How are you, friends?
Hi.
I didn't actually know that that was TOS to show people your affiliate page and stuff. Like that's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So we're on topic 1, correct?
Yeah. Topic 1. Hmm?
Okay, yeah. So as far as the way that actresses and more specifically the way that pro athletes are paid, I was always under the impression that, oh, it's just because there's not as much of an audience for women's sports. And that's kind of always been the excuse, right? And my answer to that is that they should all be getting paid the bottom rung of whatever they could be getting paid because they're fucking professional athletes. Excuse me, they're professional athletes. It's not in my opinion, professional athletes should not be making over like $1 million a year. It's incredible to me that some of them are making more than $1 million a year, and some of them are making only a few hundred thousand a year, if that, maybe 50,000 a year, something like that. Like it's wild to me that the pay gap is the way it is, but I think they should all take a pay decrease to whatever the women are currently making. It's not really a matter of to me, it's not really a matter of like why don't of people not watching these women's sports. It's a matter of if you're going to have them at all, if you're going to have the WNBA, if you're going to have, you know, whatever they have, like lingerie football and stuff like that. If you're going to have it, show it. There's no reason not to give them prime time. There's no reason not to give them prime time at least once a week if the guys are getting prime time at least once a week. Like, and I'm one of those people who thinks that we should be mixing players anyway. Like you shouldn't have to just play in one just because you're a woman or just because you're a man. Like it's really just a matter for me of if you think it's because of exposure that they're getting paid less, well then that's the network's fault. That's not their fault. It's not because they're worse athletes. It's not because they're worse actresses. It's because of the network not giving them the exposure to give them the audience they need. And if I could just really quick say something about Twitch, if you look in the top Twitch streamers that make the most money, that have the most subs, they almost never have women in the top 10. You might see Pokimane in there. Amaranth isn't in the top 10, y'all. Like, that's just not how it works. And it's not because women are worse streamers. It's just because Twitch is traditionally, just in the same way that the NBA is, Twitch has traditionally been a guys club. So there's more guy Twitch streamers.
Okay, so I'm really curious because there's a lot of things. There's some things I just agree with you and some things I disagree with you. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. But Red Charlotte, please.
Sure, come on, shoot.
Yeah, so I would disagree on the point of like it doesn't matter the viewership and revenue they bring in because that's sort of like you can pay people based on what you have and what you make, right? And I don't have a problem with athletes making tons of money, because one, athletes they have very short-lived careers. Um, and their careers usually end with debilitating injuries. Which I think it's fine to pay these people lots of money. If you want them to make less, just tax them more. And if anything, there are some professional athletes that I think should be paid way more. For example, people in combat sports, people in the UFC. Dana White is like wringing these boys dry uh, for like $10,000 a pop. It's horrible. Even though they
Mhm.
bring in tons of revenue. But I think that the argument that conservatives bring, which is like the only time I'm ever gonna agree with these fucking ghouls, is that like it does matter like how much revenue you bring in, because I think it's less for the soccer thing, because I've looked into that, and the women's soccer team does bring in more revenue than the men's team, which that means they should be paid more. But like if you talk about WNBA versus NBA, it's they're not even in the same league. They're, like, not even close. Like, uh, the revenue that even, like, one of their teams brings in just from them being that team, it makes like, when the way people make fun of the WNBA, it's like, yeah, they kind of are, like, in terms of, like, viewership, like like a joke. Like, nobody
Yeah,
watches
and
the WNBA.
that's why I said that it's not the fault of the WNBA and the players. I didn't say that it mattered that they didn't bring in viewership. I said that the reason they don't bring in viewership is because they are women, they are the WNBA, and therefore they are not given prime time. They are not given the amount of time on television in order to build the sort of fan clubs that the NBA has. And so I think that contributes to it more so than just there being a difference in the sport.
But do you know, like, what like, for example, like, the,
Probably
attendance
not
or,
whatever
like,
it is, but
engagement, like, percentage, like, men versus women, and, like, for example, what percent of basketball players, like, just in the general public are men versus women? Like, I bet for
why would I
different
know that?
sports. Well, I don't. Shut up. Fuck you. I mean,
Yeah.
like, this might like, some sports are gonna be more dominated by different genders. For example, I'm sure there are some sports where that are completely dominated by women, because men just simply don't play those sports. Right?
Hmm.
Correct.
Ninetales? You're muted if you're talking.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Discord, for not noticing my hotkey. Yeah, I disagree with the idea that sports can be dominated by different genders. I think both athletes perform to the max. And like if you're talking about how much money they
No,
bring
I don't
in,
mean by skill, I mean by, like, interest. Like,
sure.
yeah.
But like, I think that's from the standpoint of like the markets, from the standpoint of the worker, and still like in an economic sense, like what makes the worker valuable is the effort they put into it, and like in this case of the athlete, their performance. So I think a little bit of it is the amount of interest they bring in, but most of it is like, the effort they put in to get there, and that's what I think we should be like trying to focus on and reward. Just personally, as far as discussion goes. Also, based take from Johnny, men should be, or the women should be able to play with the boys, and if that makes their balls shrink, that just evens out the competition. Apparently,
Um, I'm pretty sure in most, like, sports leagues, I'm pretty sure women are allowed to join. Like, I think in the NFL, there's no rules that bar women from joining. They just don't.
Hmm.
well,
Like,
they don't try out ever.
well, they do, but they they can't. Like, they're not good enough, like, usually.
I mean,
Um,
like we can get
That would be
into
up to the
the
coaches.
yeah, we can
Yes.
get into like the trans people, engaging in sports
oh
and stuff
boy.
like that. Like it's
It's kind of
Let's
I
let's
don't know that that's what Prime intended for
let's
this
no,
topic
please.
to be
Yeah,
necessarily.
we've done it so many times. We'll do it again in the future. I promise. Just let's try to avoid it. But Melly
lead
has
me
her hand up.
on.
Yeah, I just would like to point out really quick that in athletes, I do agree with the pay being subjective because not everyone's gonna be a D1 like athlete with like historical stats. Um, and it's not the men's fault that they have more viewership. However, I guess that does bring into like a follow-up question is what the factors are for men getting more fame as opposed to women, and how that looks like even in sexualized sports, I guess you can say, such as like women's wrestling or like uh, volleyball, unfortunately.
Hmm.
I feel like the cynical answer to that is that in professional women's sports, they just don't wear enough underwear.
Hmm.
I
True.
I didn't consider volleyball a sexualized sport, but I believe you if you're saying that it is. I haven't considered
I
that.
mean, I know like there'll be like literally like especially like conservative men, they'll specifically say, "Oh, we only watch volleyball for the ass" and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. The
Like,
way
Yeah.
women's volleyball is treated, because like volleyball is one of my favorite sports. I love volleyball. But if you watch I would have to look this up. I guarantee you, people. 1 second.
Okay,
Yeah.
No, wait, then never mind. They didn't answer, I guess. Like I guarantee, like more people probably like men probably watch like fucking like beach volleyball, which is like a professional sport, because like people like to see women in bikinis like throw balls, which is like kind of gross.
Yeah.
Josie.
Okay. So again, let's not forget that the real problem is like, middle lower class, people who are working to try to get the jobs. But I also want to talk a more theoretical point, a little bit more meta here. So the reason there's so much resources in football, so much and like resources in like the NBA and all of these things is because advertising, the fetishization of like boys in sports when they get really buff and strong. So the resources and the training and the coaching and the family structures and the communities all are really designed around boys playing sports balls, right? That's what they're supposed to do. Like that's the way we were raised, right? That's the way they tried to make it happen, right? So you can also say the antithesis is like, well, which sport is the opposite? Well, women's soccer, for example, like male soccer in America isn't valued as much as football is. The resources aren't there. The sports, I guess, the salaries aren't there either. So rather than giving a young boy a soccer ball, they're giving them footballs because that's where all of the fame is, right? So if we had a cultural shift and like giving resources to young girls so they can go and be a part of this infrastructure that has been built around sports ball, around the entire idea of like fandom, I believe that we could fix those things over time. I think pointing out the systematic issues that are happening right now and these just awful pay disparities is only a symptom of the fact of how we educate and socialize women in a greater society, at least here in America. Because from the very beginning, we're told that our sports and athletic talent aren't valued, right?
Hmm.
To the point where these pay gaps make that so. So it's only an affirmation of what is going on. Did I just get okay? Sorry, I for some reason I'm like cutting in and out, I
No,
think, or something.
you're fine here on
Oh,
our side.
okay.
Yeah,
Sorry. It
no
must be
problem.
my headphone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much my point is that we got to look at the meta reasoning of why these sports disparities exist. It isn't because boys are athletically better at sports. It's because that's where all the value has been given for like the last 50 years or even 100 years, if you really want to say.
And
So
And I mean,
Um,
honestly, like women who are tall who can play football exist. I'm 6'1". I was offered to play football. I practiced with the guys. Like the reason I wasn't allowed to do it is because my mom said no, basically, and it wasn't feminine enough. So like we exist, people who could be just as good as other people at professional sports who happen to be female exist. We're just not allowed to build testosterone or start working out when we're 12 like the guys are.
uh,
Um,
Lena.
yeah, I really agree with that point that Josie made. Like, I kind of think about like when like girls are raised, like when you're socialized as a girl or whatever, you kind of grow up and you're not really told to do sports. Like you're told to do like ballerina or dance or gymnastics, which I guess is its own sport, right? Gymnastics is its own sport, but I mean like football, soccer, baseball. Not to say gymnastics isn't important, but you know what I mean. And I think that maybe if we like, I wonder if it's like a feedback loop where it's like the reason why female athletes aren't paid a lot is because we don't push them to do sports like we do boys. So like, I feel like that's a really, really good point. Like maybe, like obviously I'm a gender abolitionist, so I want everybody to be treated the same regardless of whatever they were born as, right? And I think maybe if we went to a more equalized where we said, boys, you could do dance, and girls, you can do sports, and you can do whatever you want, like that'd be great. I think that'd help a lot with the issue.
Ninetales.
Yeah, I think it's a feedback loop that like it's very hard to say where it begins and ends because it begins in many places and ends in many places, and all of it kind of reinforces itself. For one thing, is the internalized misogyny of parents. I don't see a lot of female athletes being championed in the media, so therefore I'm not going to consider my daughter to be a champion athlete in the future or anything that's worth achieving. But also for someone like me, I grew up in group homes and stuff like that. And one of the things about these group homes is they put us through the Special Olympics program so we'd have more to do and keep ourselves occupied. So I got to try a lot of different things, and I didn't really like the brutal sports. I actually ended up liking a lot more like of the ballerina type. I forget all the names now, but the spinning the ribbon around and stuff like that. Yeah, I was too afraid to actually pursue that because in a lot of those environments, I was targeted a lot for being younger and weaker, whatever, and I didn't feel like I could be feminine without like exposing myself and becoming vulnerable. So I feel like had that not been in place, had that like fear of like outing myself not been in place, I probably would have tried more of those things down the road on my own.
Um, so, in terms of Johnny Scarlett, I disagreed with what you said in terms of like the pay and like lowering their pay, and only for the reason, not because like I'm desperate to have more millionaires in the world, like that's certainly not it. Only because like where does that money go otherwise, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Part of breaking down the pay structure. Oh, sorry.
Right. Yeah. Part of it is the like billionaires, right? Like we have these billionaires who own these sports teams, right? And the money will just go straight to them, like go straight to the owners. So like if we just decrease their pay, well then we're just increasing the pay of those billionaires, and I'm definitely not down for that. I think maybe it would be interesting in terms of like let's say football, is what if instead that pay ended up going to like fund the city that they're in, like actually directly, like most of that went to civil services. Like, that would be amazing, but we're so far away from that. So far away from that. But yeah, so that's my problem there. And then the same thing is with the actors, right? So like the actors, they bring in millions in terms of revenue from these films, hopefully, right? And if it doesn't go to them, then it'll definitely go to the studios. So there's that. My only concern when I was writing this question was whether we should actually care, like in terms of like the feminist movement or the leftist progressive movement, should we care if these people don't have proper equity, right, in terms of pay, because it doesn't affect everyone else. That was my focus. But Johnny?
No, yeah, definitely. Part of the breakdown of the pay structure of millionaires and billionaires and people who are generally paid by Coca-Cola and the rest of the advertisers is that we ought not to be beholden to Coca-Cola and every other advertiser. Coca-Cola should not be worth trillions of dollars or billions of dollars or whatever. All of these, 6 little companies that run everything, all of those obviously should be broken up. That's my general leftist take, is that all of this money is being hoarded and it is being very systematically put into things that are not necessarily good for the overall American populace. Because you're right, if a lot of that money that was going from us watching TV to Coca-Cola back to the owners of the team, back to the players, if that was instead being funneled to you're right, the infrastructure of the city that they play in, or the people who maintain the entire system that they play in, the entire stadium and everything like that. If those people were being paid more equitably, then obviously the athletes would not be able to be paid $50 million a year or whatever. And that's more of an overall systematic overhaul. And I'm a little bit more big picture when I talk about that. But when it comes to actresses in particular, and actors, and I won't get into that, but as far as the actual pay gap, I think I agree with Red Charlotte. There is a matter, and somebody else in the chat too, I think it's OnlyFacts TV, was saying that there's a brand value. There's a value that they have as a brand, and they should be paid proportionate to that. They should be paid according to the eyes on them. And the problem up until this point, I believe, has been that the women's sports brand has not been allowed to grow. And that's for so many reasons. We've touched on so many reasons that women's sports are not, celebrated. But you look at somebody like, I believe it's Serena Williams, who named her daughter Olympia. Olympia is going to be a world-class athlete, because like every other little boy, she's going to be allowed to be in her sport of choice from the time she's 3 years old. And that's going to be a fantastic, boost into her athletic career. And every little girl doesn't get a chance to do that because of all these systematic cultural issues in the way.
Let's go to Ninetales, and then Ninetales.
Yeah, so like definitely I'd bring the I feel like I already semi-answered this, but I didn't answer the question directly. The reason why we need to care is because we need to value labor more so than profits and like industry and stuff like that. So really, like, these people are putting their bodies on the line for us, for our entertainment, somewhat because they enjoy it, I would imagine. I don't want to speak entirely to what their motivations are. There could be others, but I think once they get to that level, they've decided to take it to something that most of us aren't willing to take our personal training to. Hardly any of us watching probably train. I definitely put off training for another year, but I think that's what's most important, is that like are we valuing all labor in general, and like are they putting in more effort without receiving as much reward, which I don't think is like, most capitalists tell me that if you put in effort you receive rewards. So I think that contradicts that, and I think that needs to be fixed.
But if you're getting millions of dollars, right? So I don't know the exact pay gap in terms of like the women's soccer team, and if they're suddenly bringing more money, they definitely need to be being paid more. But like, let's say they're still making like millions of dollars. Like instead of making $5 million, they're making $2 million, right? They certainly are being wildly compensated for their efforts. So that doesn't mean we're not valuing labor, right?
But I also
Yeah, but a lot of training at that. If you want to answer, go ahead.
I think out of all industries in society, I would say, well, it's not perfect, because then you'll get people like you'll get fucking WWE fucking wrestlers in the UFC who make fucking millions even though they haven't trained for it or are like worthy of fighting in that league. But like generally by and large, I think sports are probably the industry where hard work probably does make you the most, because if you continue to lose, you aren't going to be famous. And if you continue to lose, people aren't going to like you. You're not going to draw crowds. And then you'll stop being paid as much. You see this in like the UFC, for example. Well, I think the floor for UFC should be much higher. If you look at like someone like Anthony Pettis, he used to be a champion, right? He was on the Wheaties box, right? Now he's never on the main card. He's always preliminary fights. His pay is down. He doesn't get as many fights, but like because he kept losing. Even though he was at the top of the world once. But then you have a ton of other fighters who continue to win, and they continue to get the main card, and they get the title fights, and like they draw the crowds because people like to watch them win. But like again, every once in a while, you will get people like fucking Brock Lesnar who fucking shoves their face into the sport because they're famous, and Dana White wants to draw a big crowd. So it's not like because you work hard, it's just because generally, if you continue to win in a sport, people are going to continue to be drawn towards you.
The only thing I take issue with is that, for the most part, like this doesn't just end at the millionaires. Now, I'm not going to say like what we do with the millionaires trickles down entirely one to one, but it does a little bit. And I think this affects lower forms of professional athletes as well, and how they are valued both like socially and by the people who are prospecting them.
Smelly, then Josie.
So, I was taking quite a bit of notes over here. I'm gotta say, I had time to think about it, and I came to like a kind of truthist take conclusion that um men are like I'm just going out on a limb here, but they're more like prone to being competitive. It's in their like biology. So I believe that that's the reason why we have such a big gap in men's and women's sports. So that's what would make the pay subjective. However, I believe that I have to disagree, and I believe that women in some sports actually do train as much as men, but they aren't seeing the benefits because of that reason. So I guess the topic is to I guess we have to shift like the society to I guess include more women's sports as like a more normal thing, and also to kind of take away from that idea that buff women don't look good or they're undesirable, and a lot of these other like takes that we like have biases against, I guess. Yeah.
I think there's going to be a response to this one. Josie.
Yeah,
You're muted.
Josie, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. So you got to be careful when you say it's just biology. Just to let you know, in North Carolina, there was a cis girl who won the high school championship for the whole state of North Carolina, and she beat all of the boys in the
Well, yeah,
boys'
Yeah,
of
she's
course.
competition.
she's
I'm
so
not talking
cool.
about
I saw that.
outliers,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, but no, I mean, like to say that boys are natural, we're like boys are, and I have boys are raised to be that way. Like they're raised to be competitive, and when women are competitive, they're seen as wrong and too aggressive, while boys can be aggressive and competitive all the time. And Johnny, I'll let you speak 2 seconds. Let me just get to this last point. We have to be able to use this entire conversation as a tool, as an instrument to be able to say that society is imbalanced in a more meta way, that there is, even at our highest echelons of our capitalist system, regardless if you're a capitalist or not, you can see that there are some basic inequalities that exist. And it's important to be able to use these as measuring tools for greater analysis and research to be able to say, okay, so what is the general issue here? Because when you're talking about popularity, you're talking about all these things, a lot of those things feed into it. It's a very complex issue. So yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
Okay, so if we're going to talk about male biology and we're going to talk about something that's actually true about male biology, maybe we shouldn't be using cloudy terms like what would be competitiveness. That's a very like high level term. You like Melly to talk about biology of a man, maybe you should use the terms like people with higher testosterone are more likely to be aggressive,
That doesn't
things that are actually
necessarily
true.
correlate.
Then
I well,
where are you getting this idea that men are more quote unquote competitive and not aggressive?
I mean,
Because testosterone makes
I
people aggressive. This is shown with trans men.
okay. I guess you can link it sort of to testosterone. I don't really have a source available at the moment,
I
but
didn't think so. Okay, I'm going to get some coffee.
Yeah, this is why
I
this
mean,
conversation is really not like fruitful, because you can't like make when you make biological claims, like you should be able
I
to
guess the
explain why you
word
believe those
wasn't
things.
biological because that has a lot of like, different like subjectory outcomes to it. I guess the better word for it is people's identification, like as to how they are. I don't know what the word for it spot on is.
And so like in basically there's two options. Something is either well, there's three, I guess. It is either entirely biological, entirely social, or a mix of both, right? Um, like that those are the only options when deciding like how a behavior originates. Uh,
Can I just ask real quick? Do you mean behavioral?
Are you asking me? I guess so, yeah. But
That's
it would have to
kind of
be
what
a
I'm hearing
mix,
is
though.
behavioral.
It would have to be a mix. It would have to be subjectory to the person.
This
but
is
but
like
even even if you're saying that like men, even anyone in this room, even if you're saying men are like conditioned to be more competitive, do we even know if this is true? Like, does
Entirely
anyone here
could
have
be
evidence
proven,
that
but
men are
it's
currently in our world, are they measured to be more competitive in nature than women in like whether it's
pretty sure I
sports,
could find a
whether it's
source
in
actually.
academia, just anything, right? Or maybe they're competitive in different things, right? So like I haven't verified any of this yet, but I just looked up a study. It said that in a questionnaire, men felt more competitive about athletics and sexual attention, whereas women felt more competitive about looking attractive. Like, I'm not sure. I don't know if this is true or not. This is just like a cursory like glance at like people can be competitive equally, but about different stuff because they're raised that
I
way.
I think more
Well,
importantly, there's an
Megan.
absence of people giving like the counter example where like they
Mhm.
feel like that they were encouraged as a female to be athletic, like athletic or competitive, or vice versa. Men who felt like, and I feel like there might be more cases of men who were just like told not to be competitive or athletic because they had weird parents. But overall, like it seems like most people just generally agree. Like if you talk to men, yeah, I had no restriction trying to be a competitive boy. If you talk to women, people would rather see me do dance and be like a gear myself towards being a proper home raiser or whatever. I feel like this devalues the work their work as a whole, symbolically as well. And I think that this just follows a trend of women get rights, but then the system only gives so much. That way, they're still like more so under a boot than their more masculine comrades.
Okay, as the resident trans researcher on the panel here, with an expert in
Well, I
the
research stuff too. I love researching stuff.
oh, I'm actually the lead researcher for the National Center for Transgender Equality, and
Oh,
am
I'm
running the
sorry.
50
That's
state.
amazing.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Sorry. I'm talking about actual I'm literally meaning professional researcher. I know everybody here researches. I'm sorry, that did come out wrong, and that was super pedantic of me. I'm so sorry. That's
Yeah,
so true. I'm so sorry.
the
Yeah.
2015 transgender national survey is probably one of the best resources like of all time. It's so
It is,
amazing.
and I'm working on the next one, which is great. So yeah. So one of the things that we hear is like, okay, we have these like different lived experiences of like men and women and things like that. But one thing you have to remember, and this is something that I think everybody can take note in, is that testosterone and estrogen and all human hormones are idiosyncratic. Idiosyncratic means that it affects every human body different. Just like, there are women with broad shoulders, there are men with big hips, there are people from all different types of human body sizes and shapes, regardless of what their genitalia looks like. It's always been that way. So it's impossible. And I'll tell you, every gender researcher, every sex researcher will tell you that there is no way to be able to say, yep, this is a man characteristic, and yep, this is a girl characteristic, because every time you'll do a mass study on men and women, it always comes out almost exactly like right in the middle. Like it's because all humans are all different in all different ways. And so when we try to attribute any type of, and I'm not trying to pick on you, Mila. I'm really not. I apologize. If it does sound like that, I'm not trying to. But when we attribute, physicalities or like any type of biological, and I know you've corrected yourself from biological, but any behavioral or any type of any medical thing that happens, like you're always gonna bite into like somebody saying, well, what about this and what about that? And I know a lot of
Right.
trans men, for example, and trans men are also they deal with testosterone the same way that a young pubescent boy does. Some trans men get really buff, some don't. And that's kind of how it works, because at the end of the day, they're men and they're gonna act like men because they're men, just like the women on this panel that are trans would also be very, we're women and we all have our feminine characteristics in our own way, but it's all different. So at the end of the day, we just need to figure out how to create equity for all genders, regardless of what class they are, regardless of where they are, to make sure that we have that equality. And at the end of the day, when we look at sports, when we look at celebritydom and all of these things, there are so many inequities already in the sports field that pay is just another one of those things that are unequal. And I think that at the end of the day, again, I'm going to go back to, we should use this as an instrument to be able to look at a greater meta argument, which is society pushes all of its resources, treasure, and gold toward men, particularly in this particular field. And the reason that this exists, there's a million of them, but we can fix them by being able to actually tell young women, like that woman in North Carolina, that, hey, you can kick the boys' asses too. There's nothing that can stop you from doing that. If you're trained and you have the right coaching and you have the right dedication, you can win too. And so I think that's what's changing now, where you're starting to see more women athletes in the space because they've been training their entire lives. This isn't something that they just woke up one day and said, hey, I want to be paid an athlete. These are people who've dedicated their blood, sweat, and treasure to become the athletes that they are, and they deserve to be compensated just like the men do. So I'm pretty much done with this topic, but that's my closer. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I'd just like to clear up that I didn't meant like in any shot. I guess like what I was meaning to say is that it has like different factors. I guess I didn't want to say biological, social, physiological, and like all of that continuing. But yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't trying to pick on you specifically. I
no,
really wasn't. It's just, and honestly, like,
no,
this is
not at
just a
all. I love
teachable,
it.
yeah, this is a teachable moment, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about like men and their like natural given things like higher wages, higher whatever, somehow, somewhere, like biology comes in. Oh, the man CEO is great because he can focus and concentrate. Oh, the man is a chess grandmaster because of the same type of things. Women don't like math and science, so that's why all the men are engineers. Like, it's so often it happens that women are just like already just seen with a biological disadvantage, even on things that shouldn't even matter, like how you can
Yeah.
read a book or how you can do a math problem,
True,
right?
but
So that's the only thing that I'm trying to bring out in the conversation, is that a lot of times when we talk about inequity with men and women, biology usually gets brought up, and it's not really it's almost become fallacious at this point. So that's all.
Yeah, because you
I
can make
just
exceptions
slightly.
to every rule. I mean, like I don't want to use anecdotes, but like you can find women that are just as competitive as men. That you can find men that are just as, I don't know, whatever they like, being attractive or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can find all of these traits in different people, and I think we should stop trying to like essentialize it to biology. I'm not saying that's what you're trying to do, Melly. I don't want to say that. I think we should stop essentializing it to biology, and we really should be looking at how does society treat different people based off their gender. How do these people react to their environments and all that? Like it's so much more complicated than just, well, they have more testosterone or they're a man, they have this. You know what I mean? It's so
Yeah.
much more complicated than that, you know?
And by the way, when I said earlier that testosterone, I was asking Melly if that was what she was referencing when she said that men are more competitive. It is a well-known fact that one of the risks, one of the side effect possible risks of taking testosterone for trans men is short-term aggression. That's at least in the first year. Now, I know this because I would like to be on testosterone someday. It's not quite
Oh,
legal
nice.
it's not legal in Louisiana yet. So we are working on that.
Message
But
me.
oh, I will definitely. Thank you so much. But Melly, that's what I was referencing. And no, I don't want to bring this down to biological essentialism. That's a little bit why I got pissed off because
Yeah, neither did I.
the biological essentialism jumped out. Like, just be warned, if you're gonna come on a panel and you're gonna say something that's very like all men are like this or all women are like this, people are gonna push back, babe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
No,
didn't
I
mean to
totally
say that
understand.
you did either,
Trust
Johnny.
me. This isn't my first panel. However, I'm still standing by the fact that testosterone does have like a play into this, and biological
So
effect has some play into it. And
so yeah,
So-
I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to say one last point on the testosterone piece. Testosterone, Johnny, it's not a side effect of testosterone. Men deal with the same side effects, right? Testosterone, regardless if you're femme-bodied or male-bodied or right, intersex, if you're taking testosterone, if you're getting it naturally or you're getting it from a doctor, the side effects are always the same no matter what type of human you are. So it's like it's not that you are getting a side effect, you're just dealing with being a man. And that is that natural thing of testosterone. It's the same thing with estrogen as well. So don't let the medical community say you're gonna get these side effects. It's like, yeah, it's called boy puberty. It's like that's what happens when a boy goes through puberty, they get more aggressive and things like that sometimes because they're dealing with the hormone imbalances in their brain. So it's not a side effect, it is just an effect of testosterone as a whole.
Oh, I
Um,
see. So I was phrasing incorrectly. I see. now.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And Johnny, if you want me to connect you with any trans men communities, I can definitely connect you with that. I have plenty in my community, in my Discord as well. That if you need a space to be able to talk through the trans stuff, we're here for you.
Aw, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's good. I should have known not to include sports in the topic. I should have just concentrated on the entertainment side because I think there's a really interesting conversation to have on like pay and how leftists view these things in terms of the elite, right, within our society. We got completely sidetracked from it, but that's my fault. I'll do better next time.
oh no.
But
I'm sorry.
we'll move on
Please
to
don't harm
another.
yourself. You're fine.
Another one. All right, so topic 2. A far-right Christian extremist group named Exodus Cry has been calling for the deaths of executives at Pornhub and has encouraged violence against sex workers and trans individuals. While it is well documented how extremist groups target Jews and people of color, it's less discussed how they terrorize trans and sex workers. Are there unique challenges faced by these targeted communities when dealing with hate groups? Do you think they also require unique legislation to be protected? Do you think that legislation, do you think religion bears significant responsibility for creating this situation, or are these groups using Christianity as a fig leaf for their own hate? I cannot speak to that at all, or usually any time. Any which way, so far-right Christian extremist group is making threats against people who run Pornhub and sex workers and also some trans individuals as well. So just like discussing, are there unique challenges when dealing with these things, or is kind of bigotry in the end? Red Charlotte.
This is a kind of thing where it's not just like, oh, we hate trans people. We're trying to like pass a law to make their lives harder. If these are individuals who are like planning to talking about and are like physically attacking people, this is something that is just like needs to be like I can't think of another policy you could do to fix this except to police it, right? These people like if they're like a organized group, right, that is like openly a hate group, I see no problem putting these motherfuckers on a watch list. Like, and then if they do something, strike them with a hate crime immediately, and then lock them up. Like, I don't know, like, how else we could possibly deal with something like this, because obviously, like, we can't deal with it by ourselves, like, as vigilantes. I don't think that's a good idea, and I don't think it's just gonna be good. It's just gonna go away by, yelling at them on the internet, especially. It needs to be something, like, done by the state.
Jesse?
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, I got triggered because I fat fingered my own name a second ago. So it's now fixed on my screen. I know why everybody was calling me Rose. Thank you. I love you all so much for that. Okay. So anyways, can you refresh me really quick, PrimeCayes, what you were the oh, it was the Exodus. That's what it is. Okay. So when I look at this question, I do look at it in two ways. First is a personal one, which is most of the hate that I've received in my life coming out as a trans woman has been coming from people who claim Christianity, that they're praying for me, that God made me perfect, you name it, bigotry, including losing family members and things like that. Second, I look at it from a policy political view. So one of the things that a lot of these religious groups are doing are they're attacking trans people in a specific particular way because they are trying to stop the Equality Act. The Equality Act, as you may or may not know, is the act that would amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to not only bolster the racial to make sure that we have more racial equality, but also grant that same equality to in regards to gender and sex. So that is one of the things we've been fighting for about 40 years. We are literally 10 Republican senators away from passing history. Now, will we get it done? I'm not sure. Now, the thing is, when you go and you hear the hearings, for example, at the Senate hearings of at the Judiciary Committee at the U.S. Senate, most of the arguments came out in a religiously slanted way. Thus, like for example, you can't pass the Equality Act because religious organizations will stop serving the 20,000 people that they serve on a daily basis to save their lives. Every year, churches save over 20,000 people with their charity work. And if you pass this, then those churches are going to shut their doors, and then the blood is on your hands for wanting to give equal treatment to trans people. And that's kind of how the argument goes in the religious community. The idea that they want to practice religious liberty by excluding trans people in particular from public spaces. So, for example, if there was a community square that had a basketball court and an organization wanted to have open signups for all the kids to play in that basketball court in some type of basketball league, if they say they can't allow a trans person, that's still legal in about 28 states. So what we have to do is we have to change that and use the Equality Act. However, religious organizations, not just the Exodus, not just the ones threatening violence, but like Catholic ethicists are sitting there saying, well, if we pass this law, it's going to throw the door, excuse me, it's going to throw the doors open to our churches and allow trans people to be in our spaces. And it's such a broken argument because their argument is literally, I want the religious liberty to not see a trans person in the public square. And so like even going in that direction, you could see that the hate is so strong, even at the policy level, where at the halls of Congress, they're still allowing people like Abigail Schreier and Catholic ethicists trying to figure out what we should do about
So
equality.
it's just an opening
There we go. I'm
statement.
done.
Okay. No, thank you.
Sorry, thank you for giving me that second.
No problem. Mel?
So yeah, I think this is ridiculous. I think they should be labeled as a terrorist group. I'm all against politics being mixed in with religion anyway. I think that what was the last? I think that oh yeah I don't like to I don't like to talk about religion in like a bad way, but there is some hypocrisy in like how Christianity works. I mean, and it's only used as a scapegoat for their prejudice against like what they don't know or what they're scared about, because sex work and being trans is like whoa, like a big like no. So they clearly are uneducated, but the fact that they're like targeting like these individuals for violence, this needs I can't believe that this is the first time I've heard of this, and I can't believe it's not getting more media attention.
Yeah,
Done.
I kind of agree with everything that's been said so far. I mean, obviously, like trans people and sex workers should be protected. They should be. Um, I agree with Charlotte. Like, there's not much we can do on a personal level, or even like even that Pornhub could do or whatever. It has to be done at a state level. Like these people who are committing these acts, who are threatening these acts, they need to be taken. They need to be locked up. And you know how like I'm rehabilitation, but like when you threaten like trans people and sex workers, I'm like, not cool. Um, I don't know if they require unique legislation. I think it should just be like broad legislation, like protecting sex, gender, nationality, all that stuff, right? And I kind of like, do we want to super focus on the religion part? I'm not anti-theist by any means. I think that religion has a place in the world, and I think people are allowed to be religious. And my problem with religion comes when you tell people what they can or can't do with their life and how it hurts you as a person. Like if you don't if you don't want to be trans, obviously that's fine. If you're religious and your religion says you can't be trans, that's fine. But don't tell my friend that they can't be trans because they're going to hell or whatever. Like I just think that's ridiculous. And not all religious people are hateful. I know plenty of religious leftists who are like, yeah, pro gay, pro trans, socialist, whatever. Um, so I think it's kind of in the middle. Like if you're using your religion to be hateful, it's a problem, especially with like this situation specifically. But if you're just religious and vibing and you just believe in God, like, okay, that's fine.
It's gonna be fun when we're all up in there.
Let's go to Nightos.
Yeah, so wow, my lighting just got really bright out of nowhere. That's fun. Yeah, I think religion has everything to do with it because there's a lot of ways that we've told religion already, like you can't go there, you can't tell people not to do this, and they stop, but then they start like stigmatizing people in society. I think like the least the least provable thing that you could take away from this is that it seems like religious groups, especially the more fundamentalist extreme kinds, love a witch hunt, and this is just the same old power trip that they get from that witch hunt. Um, how do we change this? For one thing, we can't just like get rid of these groups because this is a belief that'll keep popping up within people who just get together and are radicalized in this way. We can protect sex workers better and destigmatize their presence in society. It's very clear that like sex work itself is treated as like an inferior sort of work when it's not. I'd say it's harder and more dangerous and something that's done more. It's done for more for need than anything than some other jobs where it is just like entertainment. For example, I'm not saying porn; it's just entertainment. Um, so to me, it seems like the left needs to get their supposed cancel culture together and start like enforcing like a better representation for sex workers. And I'm going to tell you right now, like the only reason we're hearing about this and not all the other times Pornhub receives threats and stuff like that is because it's a religious group. Sex workers on every level and all sorts of companies that provide porn on every level receive all sorts of death threats and stuff like that all the time. This just happens to be a politically extreme case.
Johnny?
If I were to say what could be done, I would say that yes, sex workers ought to be included under the list of people who you cannot discriminate against, not because they're sex workers explicitly, but because they're workers, and they ought to be taxed and counted as actual working people in society, that what they do ought to be legal. When it comes to the trans issue, I'm really glad Josie went before me because that was super interesting about the religious groups taking back charity money in response to being told that they cannot discriminate against trans people, sex workers, etc. I think that if the United States really wanted to be, a bastion of secular thought and society, then they would say, okay, we're going to say that you cannot discriminate against these people, but we're also going to pledge whatever money we lose in society and whatever money is needed for those people who you are going to actively kick out of your doors because we're telling you this, we're going to pledge that money to those people. And we're going to pledge that we're going to give that people that money as charity instead of y'all. I don't think that I think in a perfect world, the United States, especially because it's meant to be a secular society, because it's meant to be a separation of church and state, we wouldn't need the charity of churches to keep people afloat and to keep people off the streets. I think it's a shame that we're beholden to these people. And when I say these people, I do mean big, conglomerate corporate type churches that actually do funnel a lot of money into our system, but it comes at a price. That money comes at a price, and that price is uh the most downtrodden people in society, the people who ought to be taken care of the most because they're the most at risk, are the ones who don't see that money.
Open to the panel.
Anybody got any particular religion takes on this? Because I don't know, dude. It seems to me that religion is become not religion itself as an entity, but people who believe in a god are becoming more and more likely to also say that my God doesn't tell you what you should do. My God doesn't uh say that I should be cruel to you. And that's becoming that's a very 21st century thing. Growing up any time before us being alive, it definitely would have been, and I think about this a lot, it definitely would have been the case that any of us coming out who are trans on this panel, we would have been at really high risk, not just from churches, but those churches that exist, those same pastors that are existing and preaching right now in the 1980s would have been praising the kids who beat up the gay kid. It's insane to me.
I get that people say generally there are good religious people, but it seems like a lot of these things are baked more into the institutions and cultures that tend to make up the meta of everything. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who are good-willed who just don't do it for all of those reasons, but there are plenty of people who do it for the power it gives them in their community, or in some cases because some communities it's the only way to have access to things like jobs and social networks and stuff like that. So I really think it's time for us to limit how much power religion has and eliminate any exceptions to the rules that we give religion at this point.
Mina?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I don't like religion as an institution. The fact that they don't pay taxes, the top down authoritarian power structures, the tons of sexism, transphobia, homophobia. I don't like that stuff. Mostly when I'm saying that there's people that are good and religious, that aren't hateful. It's individuals. Usually they're non-denominational. Usually they're not Catholic or Lutheran or Orthodox or whatever. There's nothing wrong with believing in God. Obviously, you can believe in what you want. It's my issue when people use it for hate. And unfortunately, a lot of people do use it for hate. I don't know if you guys watched Even Mama at all, but she actually did a stream of her going through her past, being in a cult and just thinking about being in that situation and how she was raised and how she grew up. I think we really need to get rid of that, specifically cultish religion, and very top down, very I don't want to say male dominated, but male dominated religion where it's all about power, it's all about the money, it's all about this and all about that. Make it more about caring about God and helping your community and less about hate and anger towards people who are different than you.
Melly?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to point out the different like hypocrisies um with religion. I guess like more Christianity, because it's like over 50% of our population. Um if they have the means to get a hateful organization that does this, it's very hypocritical, because they're not doing anything to help the situation. They're not donating money to trans people that, you know, are going through a hard time, that need it. They're not helping you know, sex workers, you know, get the rightful pay and like safety measures. And like it's just different hypocrisies. Like um this has nothing to do with it, but like um perhaps maybe it's better left out unsaid, so never mind, you can go to the next person.
So yeah, when I wrote this topic, it was less a thing on specifically religion, and more on the hate crimes that these people were committing. I thought it was interesting that they were targeting sex workers, and I forget who said it, but someone mentioned that like the only reason we're hearing about this is because it's a religious group doing the targeting here. And so, you know, to give, I guess, the audience a bit more background, the workers are taught. Sorry, excuse me. This extremist group, Exodus Cry, was talking about like implying at least that they would execute um, executives at Pornhub, right? And they were walking around with shirts. Saying that they were looking for trans people to like assault. They had like a specific like threat on their shirts.
God.
I forget exactly what it was. So like this group is it's interesting for me because I again you hear these groups target Jews, African Americans, right? Like our Latin brothers and sisters, certainly, right? Like these are the usual targets. But like to hyper focus on sexuality, right? I mean, obviously, you know, there are a lot of religious people who don't like people who are outside of the heterosexual, you know, heteronormative behaviors. But I never saw anyone target them. So I was wondering, like, yeah, like how do they protect themselves? Like how do we have to have like does law enforcement agencies have to deal with this in a different way, right? Especially since so oftentimes our trans, you know, brothers and sisters have not been able to rely on law enforcement. Like law enforcement has been a threat to them. Like just like in the case in the African American community, right? Like we know about the laws about walking while trans, you know, and that like that law, that specific law that I'm thinking of, like repealed in New York. But there's a long history of abuse from the trans community, right? So what do they, and sex worker community too, right? Like these things are very much tied, unfortunately, right? So keeping that in mind, how do we protect these people? Like, is there anything? Is there anything that communities could do to be helpful? Yeah. So let's try that, Alina.
I think, in my opinion, one of the best things to help people accept trans people and understand trans people is to have trans people in their life and understand that they're just normal people, just like everybody else. They just don't identify as the gender they were assigned as at birth. And I don't mean that for like explicitly super duper hateful people who like spout transphobic rhetoric like a TERF or like an extremist from like a religious fundamentalist group. I mean like everyday people who like might feel animosity towards trans people and don't really understand the issues. So I feel like like just having trans people in somebody's life, which you can't really force somebody to associate with trans people, right? But I think that's like a huge stepping stone, because you start to understand like these people just want to be treated like a human. That's all they want. They just want to be a person, and that's all they are. They're just another person. They just want to chill. They like eating food and playing video games or whatever else, you know.
Yeah. Let's go to Nightos. Oh, sorry, and then Nightos and Josie.
So I definitely think how normalized we are to the idea that sex workers are are just stigmatized in general needs to be countered, like from a community perspective. You know, not letting people get away with depicting sex workers in uh, a negative way, or at least calling that out and pointing out to people that this is, you know, not fair to a lot of sex workers is huge. That's the thing I'm cautious about pointing out, like how we're all responsible, because I feel like that pushes people away from the discussion. But I think here we are all just we are responsible for how this discussion goes. And if somebody says like, "Oh, I'd never date a cam girl," it's like, why? She's just using her body. People have seen it. Why do you need to be the only person who has seen her body? And I've had people tell me like they don't want to date a cam girl even if they stop camming just to be with them, and it doesn't make sense. Like it's like this idea that this person is now dirty, and this extends into like having multiple partners before them, and now I don't want to date this person because they're dirty or something like that. Uh, I really think that one of the best things we can do for kids is with sex education, reinforce the idea that sex isn't dirty. It's not bad to do. It's something that normal people do, and however you do it, as long as you're not harming people without their consent, I guess that's it. I might not take that to its extreme, but as long as you're not harming people, then that's the point. And a lot of these sex workers are just being treated like they're doing harm to society when they're not. And I think that's what drives extremist groups like this, is the idea that they're doing harm to like in some vacuous way to society. It's literally like sex workers exist, question mark, question mark, question mark, society collapses.
Okay. Sorry. Let's go to Josie, and then
Yeah.
Mel.
Yeah, so thank you, Ninetales, for those comments. You know what we're seeing is like it before it was this group, it was Westboro Baptist Church, and they were pretty extreme with their very clear hate speech on signs. I know because when I went to San Diego State University, they would come to our campus because they wanted to protest Comic-Con, because it was like their annual holiday vacation to come to San Diego to the beaches, and happened to be during Comic-Con, so they would go to campus and like literally hold up signs saying like women should not be heard, only seen, like, and like quoting Bible verses and stuff like that. So now what we've seen is even more an extremist version that is actually more overtly violent than just being like visibly like an eyesore. Now we're starting to see visible violence. 16 trans women have been murdered this year, just to give you kind of an example, already this year. And so we don't even know if some of these deaths are related. You also have the countless amount of women who are murdered during sex work. And when we look at these two groups, you look at a two marginalized groups that are stricken with violence from society, pure and simple, like death and destruction of like families and lives. And it is absolutely disgusting that they're going to try to like focus in on this marginalized group to say these people need to be um, attacked. And to piggyback on Lena's point about the how do we solve this and the visibility piece. Visibility is the theory of change for everything. More people get on OnlyFans, more people get involved in sex work. People know people who are involved in sex work, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, my cousin's a cam girl, right? Or those type of things would happen, just like it is with the trans community. I know for a fact, I know a lot of trans people in particular, that coming out to a conservative family, like all of a sudden people who they thought would never be okay with trans issues are like teddy bears and now like super base allies for trans rights. Like that does exist as well. So at the end of the day, the way that we create the change that we want is to create a safe environment where trans people can be like, I'm going to come out and I'm going to share my story about coming out. The fact of the matter is, just in the last few years, it's only been the last few years where trans people actually come out and say, yeah, I'm proud to be trans, to wave a flag that literally says I'm trans, because that used to be a death sentence. That used to be a prison sentence. Like that used to kill you. And now we're at a point right now where we can actually wave a trans flag, where we can actually like go onto the steps of the Supreme Court and wave flags saying, yeah, we're winning cases now. We have the Equality Act on the floor of the House, of passing the House and going through the Senate. Like things are changing. And when you have these giant systematic, like consciousless shifts, you're going to have the most extremist people come out and try for the love for whatever they want to spread that hate, to keep more people inside, to keep people more afraid from coming out and being the people that they want to be. And as long as we are being visible, as long as and this goes for all the people who aren't even trans here or trans identified, you have to be an ally and make sure that the people that you do know are trans have a safe space with you.
So
It,
what?
and that's what I think is extremely important in that. So yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking for more is less like individually, like people. I mean that's all important, very much important. Like making a space for these individuals to normalize these things, and so that they can get support from their families and their immediate community. But I'm talking about like dealing with an extremist group, right? And so like coming out to them is certainly not going to be of use, right? And their family members coming out to them is not going to be of much use to many of these people, right? So like how do we deal with a group like this? Like there were little and I'd have to pull up the article to get to the exact quote, but they were saying that like they were and who knows if they're actually doing this, but patrolling neighborhoods, looking for trans individuals, right? Looking for sex workers, talking about executing people with the executives in Pornhub. So like coming out and like normalizing that. I mean that's good for the overall long-term goal, but that doesn't help here. Right. So like how do we deal with that? Let's go Melly and then Johnny.
I think we definitely need unique legislature to protect these people. I mean, that's just ridiculous. What the hell? Like, they need to be labeled as a terrorist group ASAP. Man, I have nothing else to say. That's it. Just fuck these people.
Okay. Let's go to Johnny.
Yeah. On the note of like specifically what you're asking, Prime, I don't know that there is something that can be done on a wide scale basis as far as keeping people safe from these people. I mean, it's just what every other trans queer person has ever done walking to the gay bar. It's the buddy system. Like you walk with your gay friends, walk with your queer friends. It's life, babe. Walk with your queer friends.
It's sad though.
Like been doing this for 27 years. Like it's life and it's hard, and you use the buddy system so you don't get killed. That's like how it is. Walk in groups of 3 or more in the spaces where you know that these people are patrolling, especially if you're trans, or even if these people aren't smart enough to know if you're actually a sex worker. So even if you're walking to the club and you look especially cute, walk in groups of 3, because these people are not intelligent. They will not hesitate to just attack you for no reason other than they assume you're a sex worker. As far as what these groups what we should do for these groups, and I do say for these groups, not about these groups, like the same things that these people should be doing for sex workers that they want to help, which is they should have a church Pornhub account where they contact sex workers and they say, hello, I've noticed that you're a sex worker. I'd really like to get you, we as an organization would like to get you out of this ungodly thing that you're doing with your body. Can we financially help you? That's the kind of shit they should be doing if they actually want to get people out of sex work. But instead, they're sending death threats because they're not smart people. So what we should be doing for these people is contacting them, going up to wherever they're having their little clubhouse meetings, going up to their church saying, hey, we're worried about you as an American community. We are all just as worried about you as we are worried about the Westboro Baptist Church people. Can we help you? Can we get you some mental health crisis assistance? Because it seems like if you're going around patrolling like you're the anti-trans police, that you are having a mental health crisis. That's what this says to me.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Ninetales. You're
Ninetales.
muted.
Sorry, just had a COVID fit.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the idea of organizations, and I'm speaking more on behalf of the sex workers that I know, of organizations that try to get like only provide aid and response for like leaving sex work. Maybe that should be provided for people who are already considering that, but I don't think people should be approached and like essentially bribed, especially since like if sex workers were just better protected and stuff like that, we wouldn't be like people wouldn't feel pressure to not do it in the first place. Yeah, so I'm regarding what Melly, I believe, said. We like and like protecting these people. We need to make sex workers a protected class. That's not going to solve nearly all the problem because, like, unlike being trans doesn't necessarily put you in the house of a transphobe. There's a good chance that if there's a sex worker, the person who's using your services either thinks highly of you for the wrong reasons or doesn't think very highly of you at all. And there's an even better chance that like someone could just take advantage of the fact that you do that if like you're a service worker or something like that, or in a massage parlor, for example, where people just know that you do that there. So I think, and I don't think we can. Like, I don't like the framing of how do we stop these groups from doing this. This is like what they do. They pursue their hate as like an identity. It drives them as a group and mobilize them. I don't think we can ever control them directly. We can only like regulate their actions by making them illegal wherever that isn't possible. I'm not, in this sense, I'm not like an absolutist in free speech at all. I think as soon as you're not even just targeting, but like trying to advocate for the I guess it's still targeting, but advocate for like the stigmatization of a group, then your public forum right is kind of gone to shit. You can find other ways to do that. So I think we do need to focus on just like destigmatizing sex workers as much as we can instead of like, I don't know, controlling people who are obviously like
So that's
at
not
a
what I've been
different
asking,
level
like, at all.
than reasonability.
That's not what I've been asking at all. Like, in terms of like a societal response, so like controlling people. Of course, we can't control like neo Nazis, and like what they do. Like, but no one says that you can control what they do, right? Instead, it's like a societal response. In terms of terrorism, right? Like we have like responses to these things. Like there's a specific, like if there was a terrorist attack tomorrow, right, there is a specific set of responses that are going to happen, right, in terms of how society reacts, how the media reacts, how law enforcement reacts, all those things. That's what I'm looking to discuss here. But
yeah, that's why I say we limit their free speech if that's like the purpose of their political existence.
Lena?
The most important part of this piece, in my opinion, is destigmatizing sex work on a entire societal level, right? Because a lot of these transphobes and a lot of these people and like anti-sex workers, I don't know what the term is, sex worker phobe. I don't know. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Like I think like these people feel empowered by the fact that it's stigmatized to be trans or stigmatized to be a sex worker, and that they feel like they can get away with saying these things and committing these actions. And like I just feel like as a society we look down on sex workers so much, even though the majority of the population indulges in porn and things and other NSFW things, right? Like the fact that it's like the hypocrisy. I think we really need to destigmatize sex work. I think we also needed to address the reasons why people turn to sex work. I know not everybody who does sex work hates it, but I know a lot of people who do sex work just because they have to do it to survive. And I think we should address those reasons too. And I also feel like I kind of agree with Nine Tails. Like usually I'm a really huge free speech proponent. I think people should say what they want on some level, but it gets really like too like a huge issue when you're specifically targeting sex workers, trans people, gay people, whatever. Like when you're specifically saying like these people need to die, these people deserve to do this, these people deserve to get attacked, like things like that. Like that's like stepping the boundary of what you should be able to say.
So, okay. Um, let's move on to our next topic. Topic 3. At least 5 states are considering bills based on language written by a anti-vax conspiracy group called America's Frontline Doctors. Across the U.S., legislators are promoting, God, I can't read anything today, are promoting bad science and COVID denial. Do you think these bills have a chance of passing? Should the U.S. and other governments take more extreme measures to curb this misinformation? Should doctors who spread these messages lose their medical licenses? Vaccine skepticism has already been on the rise for years before COVID. Do you think it will now be a permanent part of the political landscape? Do you think this is protected by free speech, or should be regulated or regulate free speech due to it being harmful to the population? Yeah. So talking about yeah, like, so you know how like lobbyist groups work when they'll like design legislation for politicians, and they'll just push that, right? So there's a group doing this. So they're giving these legislators like bills saying with anti-vax nonsense baked into them, and so like wondering like what exactly should be the response to that. So Red Charlotte.
Yeah, I think this is something the Fed should definitely crack down on. I don't think that these are going to pass. But if they do, the federal government should absolutely step in and say no. Right? Any efforts, especially legal, to like curb like vaccines or to promote anti-vaxxer like vax stuff should be crushed. Like not even no mercy, just absolutely destroyed. And I think the federal government, like with Biden, need to make a larger effort to like push back against vaccine hesitancy. I think what like almost like 10% of Americans or something have like some level of like anti-vax like belief, and like I forgot what it was. It was like 40% of people like a few months ago were hesitant to take the like the COVID vaccine. It's like insane. It is like it's not like just a fun conspiracy. It's like a thing that kills like a lot of people or can kill a lot of people.
Okay, let's go to Jersey.
So yeah, this is really problematic, right? Because you're hearing a lot of arguments that are made with the anti-vax community that like I always get really afraid to like throw this into the universe because I'm afraid like some anti-vaxxer is gonna hear this argument and be like, that's what I'm gonna do. Um, there is an amendment that anti-vaxxers and abortion rights activists agree on, which is a bodily autonomy amendment to the Constitution of the United States, saying that no, the government can't tell me what I can and cannot do for my body. And it's a really interesting argument because it's like, well, if you're going to lump in like abortion rights with like the right to not get a vaccine, that's really scary, right? To be able to think about how do you parse that out? How do you write that out? How do you get a Supreme Court to decide those type of things? And that's terrifying. And so a lot of times it comes down to like, well, how do we make an argument? Because when I look at these things, I look at it from like a policy point of view, right? Because we can talk to people until they're blue in the face, we can try to educate people, but at the end of the day, we need 70% of this country vaccinated or we're screwed. Like that's basically the number that we have to try to get to reach some sense of normalcy in this country again. And with the things that we've been seeing, like 40% of Americans are just like, right? That is going to kill us as a human race. And it's not good. So really when you look at it, it's like, well, how do you like basically force people to get a vaccine? Because back in the past, it's like smallpox, like it was literally murking people all over the place. And they were just like, nope, gonna get the smallpox vaccine. Like, I'm getting this vaccine, like polio, getting the vaccine, like, because Americans used to have this like idea that science was a thing. Like they used to like uphold science. Like it used to be like America's number one. We're gonna come with the vaccine first. We're gonna solve this problem as soon as possible. And then all of a sudden, like people are like, you know what? Scientific American ingenuity, meh. And it's really destroying our entire society for it. And it's scary because there are so many like to fix this in a policy way can fix it too far, and then all of a sudden you have people to give grounds to like block abortions, and if you go to the other direction, then you're going to be able to have abortion protections, and then all of a sudden like now people can say no to vaccines which are good for public health that save the world. So it's like, how do you handle that needle? How do you thread it? And it's a really hard one. And the thing that I've noticed is I've just been telling people flatly who say they're not getting the vaccine, well, it sucks. I'm not going to see you then. And they're like, wait, what? You're not going to come see me anymore? I'm like, no. I'm morally against seeing anybody who is healthy to be able to get a vaccine. And now, like, and that's worked for 3 people. 3 people are like, oh, well, Josie, I want to hang out with you. I'm like, well, if you do, get a vaccine. Stop being dumb. And that's worked. But that's such a micro example. I don't know if that's going to work on a grand scale. So that's my statement.
Spiritual Molly.
Can you come back to me? I was late to get the topic, so I'm kind of just brushing
Sure,
up
no
last
problem.
minute.
No problem. That's not a problem. I understand. Yeah, you like an hour before. It was really kind of you to be here. Go ahead,
No, thank you.
Lena.
Yeah, I really agree with everything that's been stated so far. Like, to the first question, do I think these bills have a chance of passing? Unfortunately, I do, considering the anti-trans bills that have been passing in the southern states and have been being formulated in the northern states even. I'm kind of like, or even more progressive states. I'm like, you know, I really have no limits to what I think can pass, considering the amount of anti-science in these bills in like Arkansas and like I think it's Louisiana's another one. I can't remember exactly. There's a ton of them, right? I don't have any like anything can pass now in my opinion. Should the US and governments take more extreme measures? Yeah, I really think so. Like I think that misinformation needs to be dealt with. I mean, like people already get mad about being fact checked on Twitter. What happens when the government comes and shuts down their lying, stupid posts where it's like vaccines cause cancer? It's like you can't just say that without any repercussions to your for your actions because it's really dangerous.
It'll be,
We're not just
censoring.
yeah, exactly. Like we're not just talking about like, oh, well, you're lying about trans issues. You're talking about literal medical health issues that can get people killed, right? Should doctors who spread the message? Yep, I think they should lose their licenses. I'm trying to answer the questions in the thingy. I think they should lose their medical licenses if you're actively going against medical advice that is basically established in the medical field. I really think you shouldn't be a doctor if you're lying about vaccines. I think that anti-vax sentiments are a part of the political landscape. They're going to be for forever now. It's kind of just how it is. And I don't think it should be protected free speech. I think that's kind of obvious. I kind of really like what Josie said about like Americans used to believe in science. I also feel like Americans used to have a sense of community and a sense of other people, and I feel like that's just wiped away. Like whenever I'm using anecdotal here, but whenever I talk to my father, he's a conservative, right? He's always says, I don't care about other people in this country. I can only care about me and my family and this. And it's like, nobody said you had to care about everybody in the country. You just have to care about the people in this country as a whole. And I think that's a really huge problem in America right now is people are just like, well, I only care about myself. It's like, why can't you think about other people? It's like masks, right? Even if people who don't deny that masks like work, and they just don't wear them because they don't want to. I'm like, why can't you just care about other people in your community and protect them from a virus that has killed now 500 and I think 75,000 plus Americans? Like, just care about other people, have some basic level of empathy, just a little smidgen of it. Yeah, I don't know. It's really frustrating. I really don't
Sure.
like anti-vaxxers. I'm a former right-winger, if anybody didn't know that. And even when I was right-wing, I hated anti-vaxxers. I'm like, really? Like, this is so stupid. Like, why do you think this causes autism? Like, everything points that it doesn't, but okay. Anyway, tangent. Yeah.
Ninetales.
So this actually plays into the free speech thing again, where it'd be nice if they could have free speech. I don't agree with the free speech on like the personal entitlement level. I believe group speech can be free, but like the individual isn't necessarily entitled to it. I just think it's a public good that like people can share their ideas. When that ends up no longer being a public good, then I start to fall out of favor with it. And what I notice with this is that it's clearly making the jobs of the epidemiologists who are trying to vaccinate people, so we don't need more vaccinations, pretty difficult. In fact, oftentimes, uh, the only way to get rid of these things is to vaccinate the entire population. This is why the seasonal flu is most people still get it, because only a certain amount of people will voluntarily get vaccinated every year. Um, as far as regulating this information goes, I believe we need a technocracy. I don't think the power that politicians have to pass these bills is justified by their lack of training in these fields. I think that the only way they should be able to pass these sort of bills that rely on this sort of information is if experts, and I'm willing to accept maybe all of the experts in this in all the relevant fields vote on it, like a referendum type thing. And then that's the only way that this can be further passed by the House and the Senate, or whatever level it's going on at. Because frankly, this isn't something where people have legitimate reasons to feel this. They might think their reasons are legitimate, and I'll believe that. But at the same time, like, none of this is founded in reality. Like, a lot of the times they're looking at a single paper and statistic and saying, look at this, look at two people had problems, when like further down the paper it says we can't tell if these problems were caused by the vaccine or not. So I frankly, I think if public health and the public good is what we're focusing on, then yeah, we have to get rid of these people and their free speech.
Johnny Scarlett. Muted.
Thank you. Okay, so I've always been a proponent of the idea that your free speech kind of ends where my autonomy and my health and my safety begin. And so I think that I think that tracks across a wider scale of generally whether or not we're allowed to make laws that are explicitly based on something that is provably untrue, or at the very least provably not true if explicitly false, if you follow what I'm saying. So it's really a matter of whether or not they can actually get passed on the basis of just people not paying attention, or people being bought and paid for as far as politicians go. I don't think it's because they actually believe in pseudoscience by and large. I think there's a few politicians who believe in pseudoscience, but by and large, I think it's mostly, whatever they pass is because they've been bought and paid for. I have this grand idea of guaranteeing people the right to true information. If they're going to get information, they deserve true information. And that's not to say that fiction can't exist, but if something is going to be labeled as explicitly true, especially medically true, then I think that needs to be curtailed as far as what we consider to be free speech and sharing opinions. It's not the same as sharing an opinion, because it can explicitly kill people. I'm not a person who says that you have to get a vaccine, but I am a person who says that America has a major, major they have a conversational problem. The American government has a problem with speaking directly to its citizenry right now. I don't know where it happened, because in the 1970s, Sesame Street was a thing and everything seemed to be, everybody was being taught everything on TV. Now maybe that's not the case anymore because TV is decentralized, but they have a problem with their positive propaganda towards us, with what they want us to explicitly do, because they're so divided right now in the government. And so there's not really a way for them to, come together and say, hey, yes, all of us agree, you need to be getting a vaccine. We're going to support you. We're going to give you the vaccine for free. There's not a way to do that right now because everybody wants to be against the other side. It's really a propaganda problem at the end of the day for me. It's not really like, should you be forced to get a vaccine? And I realize that may be a controversial statement. But if it is, then we'll talk about it.
So I find it interesting that people have brought up being forced to take a vaccine, because no one has suggested that, like, at all. Like, and Josie, I was going to say this to Josie originally, because you brought this up in terms of this bill, talking about bodily autonomy, but like that's not the policy of the United States now, right? In terms of there will be a certain number of people who just not get the vaccine, period, right? But it's not nowhere within the political zeitgeist to say that anyone would be forced by the government to take that, right? The best that people are saying is that, well, if you don't have the documentation that you've taken this vaccine, that you won't be allowed to, you go to public buildings, or you won't be allowed to maybe travel, certainly, because other countries won't be letting you. So there's that. But no one's being forced, saying that you have to be forced, unless some people here think that might be something reasonable to do. But go ahead, Lena.
Hot take. I'm kind of so I'm not really for forced vaccinations. I'm for consequences if you refuse to get a vaccine and you have no proven, or like, let's say you're allergic to an ingredient, you are immunocompromised or whatever. Like, obviously you should not be getting the vaccine, and you should not be punished for not getting the vaccine, because you can't get the vaccine without risking your life. Obviously I don't agree with that. But like you said, like, if you don't have the proper documentation, like, I have both my vaccines. I got the Moderna vaccine, and I was sick as dog for a day, and it sucked, right? But at the end of the day, I'm gonna be able to go out in public and just vibe and just like chill. Like, I really think that we should say, if you don't have the documentation, if you don't have the vaccine, should you really be going on a plane? Should you really be in a public space when there's a perfectly safe vaccine that has been tested and proven to be safe, and millions upon millions upon millions of people have taken it, barely any issues? Do you really think, like, I don't know what the word is. It's just like, it's really harmful, right? Because, like, and I've argued with people, right? You're not just taking the vaccine for yourself, you're taking the vaccine for people who can't take it, right? Like, immunocompromised people who are allergic to the ingredients of the vaccine. And I think, in my opinion, your rights end where other people's begin, right? And that's why I believe in mask proponent. Like, I'm a proponent of masks, right? They help save lives, and that's like the most important part to me. Is I want people to be able to live, right? I think that's a really important thing, and be able to live healthy and happily. And I think that people who refuse to wear masks, refuse to or get vaccines, they're actively harming this country, and they're actively harming the people that they're around. So I'm not like for forced vaccines. I'm for consequences if you refuse to take a vaccine that's been proven to be safe.
Yeah, and in a lot of places, we already have that. In a lot of areas of our public infrastructure, for instance, schools, it is required that you turn in vaccinations your vaccination slip in order to be enrolled in most public schools, as far as I know, any public school, and most private schools. So, like, we do have a lot of consequences just for that. Maybe those consequences should be expanded.
So I got a really interesting article from my chat just a second ago, about a Miami private school called the Center for Academy Leadership has said that the teachers who got the vaccine cannot
Oh yeah,
return to
yeah,
be a
yeah.
teacher.
I saw that.
So they're
Crazy.
basically spreading false information and saying, "Oh, if you're a teacher and you get this vaccine, don't come back to school. And they're using excuses such as, oh, we're going to bar them until the end of the year, until there's clinical trials to show that this is safe. And they're like spreading false information that a vaccinated person is dangerous for a non-vaccinated person. That's how far this is getting. So this is really scary. The fact that not only are we having difficulty getting people to take the vaccine, we are now getting penalized for getting the vaccine in certain really red conservative areas like Miami-Dade County. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was a really interesting point of information, because this is bad. I mean, it's
That's
just bad.
insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's
I can
insane to
confirm
me.
too.
This
I
is why
checked
we
out
need
the
to
article
wage.
earlier.
This is why we need to wage our war, Prime, on private schools. All right, we need to abolish those things. All right, no school should be able to
Yes,
be like,
please.
oh no, it's not that you have to have a vaccine to come to school. If you get the vaccine, you cannot enter the building.
Yeah.
It's literally fucking insane.
It's
The
insane.
logic behind that.
Like I'm all about the stuff. I'm all about forcing people to do things if it creates like greater like freedom and greater good, such as forcing people to vote, forcing people to pay taxes, and forcing people to take vaccines, because vaccines save hundreds of thousands of people. That's hundreds of thousands of people free from the burden of being dead, uh, because you just have to get a needle pricked in your arm.
Right.
So, Melly, go ahead.
So I would just like to echo what my previous panelists have repeated earlier. I did some digging into what the actual law would be. The what is it? It doesn't really have a name, but I did some more digging, and it's basically ran by like this group called America's Frontline Doctors, who is a physician group that's been responsible for spreading the misinformation. They haven't even done have no experience treating COVID-19 patients. They're the same doctors that say that people shouldn't be taking an experimental vaccine, while also failing to mention the numerous safety trials, large phase efficacy trials, along with the fact that like no vaccine mandate exists. They're the same people spreading hypocritical like facts that honestly should be taken super seriously, because so many people look up to them, and man, it's become more of a political issue than a health issue. I think they should get their license like taken away.
So, Lena.
Talking a lot. I just feel so frustrated by that they are just lying in bills and they just get away with it. Like it's okay. It's kind of reminds me of with the whole election scandal where like Giuliani and I can't Sydney Powell, I think is her name. They would just get up on stage and lie to everybody to their faces. They would just tell straight lies. But the second they got to court, it was like, oh, I can't really lie anymore, so my defense sucks, like stuff like that. But like it's in legislation. Like it's just insane to me. Like absolutely insane. The blatant anti-intellectualism, the blatant anti like doctor and anti-science. Like science isn't perfect and doctors aren't perfect, and I acknowledge that 100%. They are not perfect. However, this is the best we have right now, and it's preventing a lot of deaths. I mean, you can look at COVID graphs. They've been really declining in most places, or in the US, I should say. Don't look at India's. They're really bad right now. But like in America specifically, our deaths have gone down, our cases have gone down. And I really do attribute that to our vaccination processes and the fact that we've gotten a lot of vaccinations out. And the fact that these like people are just like, they don't even believe in science. They're just like, oh, vaccine bad. And it's like, it's been tested. I mean, yes, it's one of the fastest created vaccines in history, or if not the fastest, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. They've done test trials, they've run clinical trials and all that stuff, and it was proven to be safe. I mean, you think about like I believe it was the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. I think it was like 6 people got blood clots, and they pulled it out of the market, and now millions of people don't have access to the Johnson and Johnson. But we still have birth control in the market, which has a much, much, much higher rate of clottage and all that. And it's just
Yeah.
like it's like just it's fear mongering, honestly.
So, Red Charlotte,
Mm.
what you said about forcing people to take it. So, you are a resident. What was the name that they gave you? Yeah, a Marxist, like neocon or something like
Thank
that, right?
Marxist neocon. Okay.
Yeah, no. We had this discussion previously. Someone called you this. I think it was like Dancegram or something.
That's so funny.
But your idea about forcing individuals to do this, but wouldn't it be better to simply incentivize rather than force, right? So, like, for instance, saying that you'd get a $2,000 for doing this. There's a I think it's West Virginia. I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think West Virginia is offering its younger individuals $100 saving bonds, which is not much, but $100
Well,
saving
for
bonds
like right now, I think we should give everyone like $100 to take the vaccine. Like everyone, and people who have already taken it should get like a retroactive like $100. But I'm talking when I say like forced vaccines, I'm talking about more like general, not just outside of COVID, not just in COVID. I mean in general, like the yearly seasonal flu shots, like all the different like tetanus shots, all these different things. Unless you have like a certified medical waiver, right? Like as in you're immunocompromised, blah 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 blah, whatever, right? If you're not one of those like special groups of people, suck it up, take the needle. Like I think that's how I think it should be.
But would you trust the government with that? Okay, I mean, like we we know, right? African Americans know that the government has not been trustworthy, right? The medical institutions have not been completely trustworthy with these things in the past. So, are you putting that? Like, imagine if Donald Trump was still in power right this moment, right? And then he was saying, you gotta take this vaccine, right? Would a lot of people people didn't trust the vaccine previously, right? Once it was being approved, because it was under Trump and they thought something fishy was going to happen. But
so the thing is, like, the president doesn't have that kind of power. The president doesn't get to pick and choose like what vaccines are like good and what are bad vaccines. And like people will cite, like, I know the distrust comes from the Tuskegee experiment, but the thing is, like, vaccine trials aren't done like that anymore, and they wouldn't be done like that anymore in secret against a particular group of people, especially in the age where if that was happening, it would come out immediately. Because the CIA tried to do this in 2013 in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it got caught almost immediately. Now they shoot vaccine like distributors in that area because they think they're spies now. But like this occurrence doesn't really happen anymore.
So, but Red Charlotte. So I'm not referring to like a Tuskegee experiment 2.0, right? I'm talking about like the very real racism, for instance, within the medical field, right? That's a thing, right? And there's anti-trans bias too within medical field. We know this as well, and there's to some extent misogyny as well. I mean, we see these things how they operate. But anyway, racism within the field, and it is not unreasonable, right? Not unreasonable for people to be skeptical because of their past lived experiences of the medical field and of government's interaction with the medical field, right? And so to say that we are going to force you, individuals, right, to go put something within your body, is that not too far? Instead, would it be better to be like, again, so you would definitely trust the government into the future, right? Not just this government, but future presidents, right, and future administrations, right? You trust that society would never use this in an improper fashion.
Well, it could possibly happen, but I think that like the probability is so low that like it's worth doing it because it's gonna save so many people. Like uh like I said, like if something like that happened again and it was tried in like the developed world, it was caught immediately because of the information age. Like we are
Mm,
able to catch these things when they happen.
not
You're not going to be able to secretly like vaccinate people with like specific groups of people, especially because vaccine trials nowadays are like they'll do them nationally representatively. They'll go like they administer them across all groups. They don't just like target specific groups of people who are
you're
marginalized.
too hyper focused on Tuskegee experiment and like what that would look like.
Well, but that's where it stems from, though.
Yeah,
That's where
no,
the distrust stems
no,
from.
no. So, but I'm telling you, it's more than that. It's like that's the start. But I'm saying that like the fact that black women have a higher mortality rate when giving childbirth, right? The fact that doctors will like give less painkiller medication to African Americans, right? It's the fact that simply you won't be listened to, right? So people asking for help, letting them know their medical problems, right? Like the medical issues, and doctors actively not listening to it. There was a case within COVID, right? A woman who was a doctor, and she got infected, and she was trying to relate her problems to the people who were taking care of her, right, to other doctors, and they did not listen to her. She did not get the care that she deserved, and then she died because of it. So that just happened. So this is an ongoing thing, right? So not simply like the Tuskegee experiment. Not everyone even knows about that, right?
Or they don't believe you.
Yeah, they really don't even believe you. So there's lots of things happening. So within that climate, right? Why would you trust the government necessarily with that power of not only like managing your body, but putting something? Oh, 1 second. I gotta 1 second. Thank you. Oh, thank you, my good friend Shower. Hey, Shower. Thank you for the raid with 137 people. Gotta shout out my good friend. I missed your stream. I wanted to see you stream. But I was, gotta do my own thing right now. But I'm so glad that you're back, Shower. That's feeling a bit better. And I'm just really happy to see you. Thank you so much for the rate. That's really kind. Two people who've come in, just quickly. My name is Prime. I do these like political type panel streams, and we put these things together. It's a lot of fun. We're right now talking about anti-vax legislation going through the states, right? Like people are actually putting anti-vax myths into law, and like what does that mean, and how much power should the government have, and all that stuff, right? If that interests you, give me a follow. Also, we have open panels. After this, we'll have open panel where audience members like you, yes, you sitting at home, I'm talking to you, yes, you can be involved. You can jump on in, you can have a conversation about either this or something else, right? So we'd love to have you. Thank you so much, everyone who came in with Shower. Please go and follow the channel right now, hit that notification bell so you know I'm going live, because we give you content 6 days a week. 6 days a week we have this content, so hit that follow button right this moment. Again, I love you so much, Shower. She's a very good friend of mine. Oh, Shower, thank you for resubbing. That's really kind of you. She's a very good friend of mine. And everyone, I put her link in chat. Give her a follow. I'll put it in there again. But her streams are a lot more fun and calming, because there's no one yelling at each other. She's yelling at the chat, but there's no one yelling at each other. So check out my good friend Shower. I love you so much, friend. All right. So I read Charlotte. So if you want to answer the question or not, I will move on to other people who want to jump in.
So I don't think the bias in like the healthcare industry is enough to justify not forcing everyone to get the vaccines, especially when we are in a dire need to get 70 to 80% of the country vaccinated, when like it's gotten so bad. Like I have to get like a poll real quick, but like this article, when it was written February 2nd, that was pretty while ago, it said uh like the difference between, like, for example, white versus black distrust of the vaccine is too high to just like justify, okay, they're afraid of it, therefore it's okay for them not to get it, right? This is not, it's just more of a matter of like their fears being mostly unfounded. And this is like a problem that needs to be dealt with sooner or later to like fix the trust between like people, different groups and vaccines. People like if you read some of these like anecdotes and like quotes from people about why they're hesitant to take the vaccine, like from interviews and stuff, named Wyon Stovall Johnson, 54-year-old mathematics teacher. She has a PhD and she's extremely educated. And her only like reason is that she just doesn't trust the government. Like that's literally it. There has to be a point where we say everyone has to take the vaccine, and then they're also citing like, oh, we don't know what like the side effects are going to be in 3 to 4 years. Right? It's literally conspiracy stuff at this point. So it needs to be everyone's going to take the vaccine, and everyone's going to see that nothing's going to happen, and then this will increase trust in vaccines because people will be forced to see that there's no problem with vaccines. You took them, you're fine. People around you have stopped dying. Like especially in like poor communities and communities of color where people are disproportionately dying. Like if they see the impact of less people dying, people are going to be more trusting of vaccines. Something has to be proactively done. It can't just be allowed to fester for eternity because of distrust.
So I disagree with you, but I want to let some other people in, and I'll get back to you later. But go ahead, Johnny, and then Josie.
Goodness. No, absolutely not. The way to increase trust in the government and vaccines is not to force people to do anything. As I said before, we have an issue with coming together in this country as either an administration or just as general states as a whole to actually tell people how the government feels about something as a whole, to have a unified message, to say we are going to incentivize you to take this vaccine because it is what is best for you according to the best and the brightest scientists that we can possibly get in the first world. Like that's the way to do it, is to incentivize people and to have a reason to trust the government, not to be forced to trust the government. But I don't think we're going to get anywhere on that. But it is interesting that Johnson & Johnson was taken off the market, and yet we have something like acne medication. It's a pill acne medication that if you are a female and you're taking it, especially a young female, you are required to have a monthly blood birth control test, but not birth control, but pregnancy test, in order to make sure you're not pregnant. Because if you were to get pregnant on this acne medication, it's called Accutane, by the way.
Mhm.
If you were to get pregnant on Accutane, there is approximately a 92% chance that the fetus will have immediate debilitating side effects, including not being born without a brain, things like that. And that's on the market and has been since at least the 1970s. So the fact that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was immediately taken off because 6 out of 200 million people got a blood clot is insane to me. That's still not a reason to tell people that they have to take a vaccine. And I think that that would be absolutely any sort of legislation that could possibly lead to that would be so debilitating to this country and to the already flimsy trust that we have in our government that I don't even know what the consequences would be long term, but I know they would not be good. No, absolutely not. But as far as the actual question goes, as far as like whether or not we believe that that it should be, as far as whether or not we should be making legislation based on information that everybody doesn't agree with, I think that when Ninetales said something about a technocracy, and I think I would adjust it to be meritocracy, but also technocracy would be applicable. I think that we have the technology to actually go on real data. The reason that we were able to get this vaccine faster out than any other vaccine is because we have 3D modeling of the internals of the body as well as what the actual coronavirus looks like. And so we can actually 3D model and say, this is what a vaccine is going to do once it goes inside your body and comes in contact with a coronavirus. That's how we were able to do that. So we have the ability to crunch the data and make sure that we are doing something that is going to have efficacy, like actual provable numbers wise efficacy. And I think that that's what we need to be basing more of our medical I'm not even going to say medical legislation, but the trajectory of the American medical situation, we need to be basing on actual data and facts. And I think Millie's right. Like, and Lena, we used to have a sense of America's the best and the brightest, and America leads the first world, and we're going to, have all of these scientists who do the best things. And now we've been sort of overtaken by this. I hate to say it, but like a religious, non-scientific, right-wing wave of just people who think that the best thing in the world is to do whatever the hell they want for their individual family, and they have no sense of what is best for the human race as a whole, let alone Americans.
Let's go to Josie, and then
Just to be fair, Lux had their hand up before I did, so I don't know if
so yeah,
which
I'm just like
one.
trying to go ahead.
It's
Hey,
okay.
you're fine. I've talked a
Okay.
lot. Go
So
ahead.
go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Joseph.
Joseph.
Okay, awesome. And then Nine Tails after you. After so I will let you go after me. So this is a very interesting question, right? Because it's kind of confounding a few things together, right? Like it's the idea that you have like the natural distrust of people of color, Black people, Indigenous people in particular, that have a sense of distrust to the medical industry. We have, as a researcher, I deal with something called the Institutional Review Board, which is basically a scientific ethics panel. And I actually, our IRB actually is a medical study IRB. So, like, normally their vaccine trials and trials for medication, that's usually, and even for a survey, they're considered subjects. So you're still held to the same ethical standards. I think we have to take but we have to zoom out, right? Because I think we can lose the forest from the trees when we start talking about like the racial component to like the anti-vax like understanding. A lot of the policies are coming from people who are privileged. The anti-vaxxer movements, a lot of them are pretty caucasus. The caucasity is strong in that movement. Um, and we don't have that, and we can't forget that, right? Because those are the loud voices that are doing it, because we wouldn't be passing policy if it was only Black people protesting this, right? Like everybody would be like, you black people are going to take the vaccine if you like it or not, right? And then that really makes it feel like, whoa. But because white people are so against the vaccine, now Black people and people of color, Indigenous people are all being lumped in now, being like, see, it's their fault. It's their fault that we're having these problems, when they're being led by a Caucasus group of people who are super privileged and think that they're invincible, right? Like the private school people that did that in Florida. So that's a big issue. I am always going to be against like forcing, because I think that education, we can solve it. It's interesting, PrimeCayes, because I actually have been dealing with some of the Black leaders here in San Diego and talked to some of them about this issue. And there are campaigns, community campaigns in all the minority communities right now that are trying to teach people like, get your vaccine. And this is being led by like community leaders, like actual leaders on the ground that people trust. And believe it or not, like the POC, the BIPOC people are getting their vaccines pretty quickly. And I know, because as a trans woman, as a like working for the NCTE, like I've had like people email me saying, "Hey, is it safe to take this because of my hormones?" Like there are so many fears that are like spread amongst society that have to be debunked. But usually after I'm like, no, everything's safe, everything's fine, it's okay. They're like, okay, good. I'm gonna go get my vaccine at my local LGBT pop-up where they're giving vaccines away. And so education does work. I understand that there is like a government mistrust. I understand that there is a good reason for people to be like a little distrustful. But one thing we have to understand too, and I think this is what's happening a lot in the BIPOC communities, is that as people become educated, the vaccines are starting to be administered. And a lot of times where the big fear is if there's a vaccine or there's like a medical procedure that is being done exclusively on Black people or exclusively on women of color, because that happens all the time, or at least it happened in the past. So we can use the data point of like, hey, everybody's getting this is good for our public health. And usually it comes from a black leader or a community leader of the marginalized group, and it gets done. It's the people who are, like I said, a little bit more Caucasus are the ones that are putting their heels in the sand and are literally changing governmental laws. So I think we have to be careful when we say, okay, like maybe it's the minority communities not getting the vaccines because they're afraid of government, because usually those issues are alleviated after a few months of education, while these other people are literally passing laws and making teachers not come to teach children. And those aren't Black people. Those aren't people of color. Those aren't Indigenous people. Those aren't queer people. Those are people who have the privilege to sit safely in their homes, and it's dangerous. So that's kind of how I'm going to look at it from a meta point of view, because the question is so huge and complex and has a ton of inputs. But that's the way that I'm going to look at it. So
So,
Nine Tails to you, I guess, or PrimeCayes, I guess you're the moderator. Go ahead.
sorry, Melly, did you? I wasn't sure. Did you have your hand up previously? Just making sure.
No,
Um,
Nine Tails.
No, hold on, Joanne, I got it. Joanne, I got it. I just want to make sure.
Ninetales was
Hey,
first.
hold on.
I did
know.
raise my hair first.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, thank you. All right, Ninetales.
Yeah. So yeah, on the forced vaccine things, I think we can look at like what we do with schools to look at like we generally don't do this based on like what people trust. In fact, what we do with schools, I think, is done as an action to counter what people trust, because we can't rely on people to vaccinate their kids after properly educating themselves about things. And I say that's what the forced vaccine thing is too. If we really want to get rid of this virus, if we really want to get rid of another chance of a mutation causing another pandemic, we have to eliminate the bioload within our population. And so the only way to do that is to get 100% of the population vaccinated. That's why I think, as far as public health is concerned, which I do weigh much more heavily than public opinion, and as far as like preventing further pandemics goes, that's why I say we need forced vaccination. It's definitely good to take measures to educate people, so that way there is better trust. But it's ultimately something that like we can't let it like hold back what we do to keep the population healthy.
Go ahead, Lena.
I guess I just like I think about how people react to being forced to wear masks, and I apply that to vaccines, right? I worked at a place where we enforced masks, right? In my state, I live in Wisconsin. We did have a mask mandate that was repealed by our stupid Republican legislator, of course. Typical swing state shit. Um, and I think about that, and I think about people reacting that way, and it's never going to go over well. Like, you'll just make people more against vaccines. You'll make people feel more animus towards the government. I just don't feel like it's a good solution for the problem that we're having, right? The problem that we're having is a huge swath of misinformation, a huge swath of lying, and it's even spilling into the government, right? Not just online from political commentators. It's in legislation. It's in political, I'm sorry, like government officials' mouths. Like, it's a problem, right? I don't think that forcing people to get the vaccine is gonna fix the problem. I agree it'll fix. I'm trying to think of what to say. I'm sorry. I agree it'll
Can I just
fix.
ask real quick, what
Yeah,
problem are we looking at here? What
I was
problem are we
thinking
trying
like
to fix?
specifically with people not wanting to take the vaccine, and as a result, there being issues because of people not taking the vaccine. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah,
I just feel like forcing people to take the vaccine is just going to be a disaster.
Create more like hatred and like
Yeah.
separation, I guess is what you're trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, like I
I
think
agree
about
with
how
that.
people react to masks. Have you ever had to ask a guest to put a mask on?
Yeah. It's
One of
like
my
pulling teeth
coworkers,
from a child.
one of my coworkers got threatened with a gun a month or a week after I left my job because she asked somebody to wear a mask. Like, she got threatened with a gun. Like, I learned about it today, so my mind is a little blown. But like, somebody was open carrying, and she went up to him, and she's like, "Hey, sir, do you have a mask? It is required." He's like, "Do you see this gun on my hip?" Yeah, he got kicked out of the store pronto. He probably should have gotten the police called on him. But like, I think about that with vaccines, and it just feels like it'll be a bad situation. It'll be dangerous. There's going to be a ton of pushback. I mean, you think about all the revolutionary right wing types, right? They're like, LARPing, we're going to fight the government if they make me do anything I don't want to do. Like, I just see it causing a lot of problems. I think we should focus on stemming misinformation, biting it at the bud, getting rid of it at the bud, right? and then we also should increase vaccination efforts. I feel like those would be just so much better. And I understand we don't want mutations. We don't want people who refuse to take the vaccine for the rest of their life. I get it. But like, I just see all the problems that can happen with forcing people to take the vaccine, especially with the government overreach. And I felt a little frustrated when you're kind of like, well, Black minorities' fears are unfounded when it comes to the government and the vaccine and medical care. And I'm like, Prime brought up some really big examples of minorities being treated incorrectly by medical professionals, and it happens. I don't think it's unfounded.
Yeah, but
right?
those weren't analogous examples.
I mean, I guess so. I guess it's
Taking a vaccine and then finding out your skull doesn't explode and you don't get a worse disease like that you thought you were gonna get after you take a vaccine is not the same as like doctors being more unwilling to like less willing to give you painkillers because they don't trust you saying that you're in pain and them not taking the proper precautions leading to like higher like maternal mortality during like childbirth. Like these are like
yeah.
not the same at all. Like because the
Like I agree.
trust is founded in fear of what the vaccines will do. So if you take the vaccine and nothing happens, what do you think people are just gonna like rationalize around that and say like, oh, I just got like a faulty vaccine or something?
So
Like, do you
I
think
just
you think giving everyone $100 is gonna make people who think that the vaccine is dangerous is gonna make them all of a sudden be like, yeah, I'll take it I'll risk my life for
Yeah, it won't
$100?
work.
Yeah,
So
I
like
think
go ahead.
that's why I focus more on re-education rather than forcing them. Like I don't
how are you
know.
gonna re-educate the population in the next year and a half?
I don't have exact fixes
I do if
to
you.
that. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Scarlett. You can
I
take
want
it
to
if you want. I mean,
Melly.
but Nine
Oh,
Tails
for
has
sure.
their
Hold on,
hand
hold on,
raised.
hold on. I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Melly. Okay, so you don't have to. All right, so we'll
I
go.
want to hear Johnny's take, and then I guess I could finish wrapping up.
Okay,
Take
great.
notes.
All right. So before that though, Red Charlotte, I think you're mixing you're mixing two issues together, right? One is simply just the general anti-vax craze, right? And then the other, separately from that, is racism within the medical field and how that affects how people operate with that, right? So those are two separate things that I guess maybe exist on some sort of spectrum. I'm sure there's some middle ground in there, but those are two separate things that I was discussing.
Yeah, but my thing is like,
and
how would the bias that exists in the medical community, because I do know it exists and it's a big problem. How would this affect, for example, vaccine rollout? Would
so,
it manifest itself in less access to vaccines? Like, obviously, yeah, but that's different from like
You just
abuse.
answer your own question.
but
No, I
okay.
didn't.
Yeah, you
I
did.
just I falsified the thing I just said.
So okay, I don't think you did, but
No, because
We all heard it.
if the distrust is the harm that will come to you
hold
from the
on.
government.
So let me finish my point. Let me just finish what I was trying to say here. You're saying that like, okay, so we force them all. Let's say every single person who is able to, without dying, within our country, forcing them to get this vaccine, right? Like, and then nothing happens, right? For almost all of them, I'm sure some of them will have some severe side effects, but for almost all of them, nothing happens, right? And then that will end the whole anti-vax craze. I'm telling you, that won't, because one, they didn't logic themselves into this. They're not going to logic
I didn't say that.
themselves out
I
of
said
it.
it would increase trust,
Okay, so
not fix the problem.
people, there are people who are, for instance, drawing conclusions, like we saw with like the whole autism thing, right? Like there is no link there, but people, I actually met this guy. I remember he came over to my house one time, right? An older gentleman, and the whole anti-vax thing came up somehow. I brought it up and I was just laughing at it, right? He's like, oh no, I've seen it, right? My kid, he's got autism now. He took the vaccine and then he has autism. So yeah, it's true. So like they can draw these,
right?
but they can draw these connections without like logic. Just because you're saying that, like, oh, your head's didn't explode, well, you can draw connections to something else, to anything else, and that will be a problem. And then people still, for instance, still get autism, and you can still draw those conclusions, right? Like that in itself, it's easy, right? It's a disease that's not well understood, that appears oftentimes after the initial vaccinations, like initial infant vaccinations. People think, well, one leads to another. That can happen easily. You can respond, then we'll go to Nine Tails and Johnny.
I just don't think this is substantiated like at all. Like the risks of like the amount of people who will die will far outweigh the amount of people who are going to be like, oh, look, I took the vaccine and my kid had autism, therefore blah blah. But the thing is, the same is true for my point. More people will see that nothing happens after their vaccine is taken and will come to the same conclusion that the vaccine does nothing. Because obviously there will be some people whose stuff will happen after the vaccine and they'll blame it on the vaccine. People are already doing that, right? Even people who are more trustworthy of the vaccine, they're already doing this. So like this won't like increase the problem. Like this problem is already small and it's already happening. Like you're just gonna have more people who are like not being dead and are gonna like be more trusting in the vaccine because it's not going to hurt them, it's not gonna hurt their family, and it's not gonna impact them in any way.
Let's go to Ninetales and Johnny. And Mel.
Yeah, it sounds like what we're all in agreement is that you can't have it both ways. You can't have this forced vaccination and people trusting the government. Okay, fine. I still think that unless you're okay with this setting a precedent that will lead to our stupidity, leading to our demise as a species, going based on people's uneducated whims doesn't actually work, especially as far as epidemiology goes. In fact, I'd say like people shouldn't have to die because other people are stupid. I think that that's probably a moral axiom that most people in society agree with. So, in this front, the scientists are the educated ones. The epidemiologists are the ones who are actually trying to get this pandemic eliminated, not just swept under the rug so we can have a nice summer vacation or something like that. And like I think if we're going to set a precedent where fear of the unknown can drive policy, then or like influence what we do to stop our species from like suffering as a whole, then we might as well just like admit that like medical ethics have gone out the window. But more importantly, like the only way that this would work is if you could provide like substantial evidence, like specific data that like shows that the vaccine is dangerous, which I think if they're not doing that, we're just catering to like things and giving them reverence that they don't deserve.
Let's go to Johnny, then Melly.
Okay. There are so many things, but
I want to hear what you were gonna reply to Lena about
oh yeah,
forcing them before you forget.
no, it wasn't Lena. It was Charlotte.
Oh right.
No, they're and I think I have already forgotten it, but thank you. But yeah, this is why I was saying earlier. This is why I was saying earlier that like we are in a spot right now where people don't know what sources to trust because we don't have a unified government voice or societal American voice in general, which generally has been, the government, that says this is safe. Here's all of the facts put down in a way that you can understand, even if you're not an epidemiologist, because that's very important. If you can't explain what you do for a living or basic data of a vaccine to somebody in a way that somebody who's not an epidemiologist can understand, you're probably not a good epidemiologist yourself. So we ought to be going on the basis of educating Americans. And I say ought to, we're already going to do it. Nobody's going to force vaccines. That's absolutely not going to happen. We already do so much. People have pointed out in the chat 1,000 times. We already do so much to basically force vaccines. We have them, you have to turn them in for work. You have to turn them, especially if you work for the government, you have to turn them in for schools. All these different public places are requiring masks now. I have just been informed that one of the clubs that I usually do promotion for is going to be requiring people to turn in to show their vaccine cards when they start doing exclusive events again. And that's going to be the only way you can get in. People are already doing this in a way that is not going to literally be, we're making legislation that's going to put a needle in your arm. Like there's so many opportunities in media, in legislation that leads people to build community centers and places of education that are senior specific, that are school specific. There's so many areas where we can funnel information and we can funnel education about what is actually true and correct about these vaccines. And we're not doing it because we have an extremely divided populace in government. So what we need to be doing is we need to be actually having Joe Biden needs to make a big ass bill that says that here's all the places we're going to be sticking money so that you guys, American people, because believe it or not, that's what the government's made up of, is people. American people can go around and they can educate their fellow populace. They can knock on doors with masks. They can tell people and educate people. You can bring, whenever somebody comes into a clinic, you can be guaranteed that they will speak with a specialist about whether or not they're getting a vaccine. These are all things that we can funnel money into and funnel information to as Americans and be unified. And it's unfortunate that it's gotten to such a drastic point that people like Charlotte and Nine Tails do feel in their hearts, because I can tell y'all are really serious about this, that you really do think that we ought to be like forcing people to get vaccines because you straight up think people are stupid. People aren't stupid by and large. They're scared. And if you educate them and if you don't act like it's going to be, we're going to hate you if you don't get this vaccine, maybe people will be less scared. That's just me, though. I don't personally hate my fellow Americans, and I don't think they're stupid. So that's me.
Melly, then Nine Tails.
Yeah, but like, oh, okay, sure.
So I would have to agree. As like forcing is probably not the right way to go. Let's see. But what I was going to point out was that people aren't going to trust the government anyways. They're not going to trust. People don't trust the CDC. Shit, people aren't even getting the vaccine because they're afraid of needles. So even if we have a universal government to kind of give like fact-checked real stuff, some extremists aren't going to believe that either. So I guess the question is about setting harsher restrictions to I guess mentally force people into getting a vaccine, and how far that should go.
Nine Tails.
Yeah, I like public education is kind of like a utopia thing where people like value that and get some sort of return on investment. But I don't think capitalist society, for one thing, really encourages people to invest their time into becoming educated and stuff like that. It's kind of like bringing a horse to water but making it drink thing. And I think that that's like with mass behavior of like groups of people, you can't just say like, oh yeah, we'll just offer the education and then they'll be educated. It like, yes, you will see an increase of an education in that population, but you can't educate everybody. And unfortunately, this virus is pretty like pretty good at spreading, it turns out. So like, if we don't want this pandemic again, then we can't rely on people becoming educated.
Go ahead, Josie.
So we also have to look at the other side of the argument, right? Let's say we accepted Red Charlotte's argument and what she had to say about that. The issue then becomes, how long would it take to be able to pass a policy that would force everybody to get a shot in their arm, right? So really, I hate to use this, but it's a non-unique argument, right? Because at the end
That's
of the
why I said
day,
you pay people first, and eventually you create a mandatory vaccine policy in the future. Because I
that's
said it
fair.
wasn't just for COVID; it's for.
Innovation,
I think
yeah.
the yearly flu shot should be mandatory for all adults and all children who can't who
Mhm.
are able to safely take it, obviously, because that's what the CDC recommends. But only like 45% of everyone 18 and year older every year gets the flu vaccine. And the flu kills like 40,000 people a year.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot of
so so I guess what you would have to say is like the incentivization works up to a certain level. There are people who won't be able to take the shot because they actually are allergic to some of the reagents in the vaccine, so they wouldn't be able to get it. So there would be like an ableist thing involved in that. But I think we can maybe solve those things. I think that incentivization does make sense to me. Um,
Yeah, like
but
right
I
now,
think
just give
I
everyone $100 to like take the vaccine so we can get as close to 70, 80% as we possibly can as soon as possible. And then in the future, like so that like the next time we have a pandemic and the next time we have a new vaccine, it's immediate like mandatory rollout. Everyone gets it as quick as possible because it's mandatory.
yeah.
We
I
need to
guess
make the
yeah.
vaccine cool, like
Yeah.
make it into a vape form. That
No,
way
So-
there
people
should be a
will
massive
vape it.
propaganda campaign going around by
Yeah.
the Biden administration, which they're doing what they can, but it's not enough. They should be running like ads 24/7. They should be doing like not rallies, but like just like stuff like rallies and organizing to get people to take the vaccine and framing it as like you're not just saving yourself, you're saving other people, right? Like it is your civic duty, right, to take the vaccine. To protect yourself and to protect the elderly and the at risk in your community who
But
will
that's
put an
education.
emphasis on will die.
That's
Uh,
education.
that's not like
That
it's like a
you're literally talking about public education systems, which I mean, we're educating people with PSAs and things like that. That's what that sounds like, which is kind of what we need to do. I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess for me, I think if we were gonna do something, this like winning people over with the sugar idea rather than the stick I think is really great. I think overall we need to do everything we can to make it happen up to the point where you're like holding somebody down and sticking a needle in their arm. So yeah.
So, Red Charlotte, what would I'm curious, what would this actually look like in terms of forcing people, like the actual mechanics of such a policy? And remember, you're talking to a person who's more than once advocated for confiscating guns in America, right? So I'm not against like government action on these things, but like, what would that actually like? What would the punishments in place? What would it look like in terms of law enforcement?
oh, punishment.
Yeah.
I would just see it probably just do the mandatory voting thing that they do in Australia. Just get a fine. That's it.
Oh,
Like
are you just asking for a fine? That's what you're asking for mandatory?
I can't imagine it'd be worth giving people jail sentences, but I think
People
a
will pay the
fine
fine,
that
though.
isn't so large that it's unpayable, but like large enough where it's like, yeah, I'll do the vaccine, right? I'd rather
Fines
not
only
pay that
affect
money.
poor people.
Like
That is like
most
anti like
most
poor
Americans
people.
are $500 away from basically homelessness. So this is
Yeah.
almost everybody. I it, I know it will affect mostly poor people, but most people are poor. So we need to affect the most people as possible. This is like the same thing with like guns, right? Oh, increasing taxes on bullets will only hurt poor people. Okay, and most people are poor. It will affect the most people possible.
We're
So
Is
talking
one
about a mandatory vaccine versus
it should be
buying a
free.
gun on your own, though.
A vaccine should be free. It should be like free of
Yeah,
cost.
but the fine isn't free if you don't get it. Like you're forced to get the vaccine, and if you
You're
don't
also
get the
forced to pay
vaccine, you're
taxes.
fined, right? But you're not forced to buy a gun if you don't want to.
You're forced to do
I
many
think it's a
things.
false
You're forced to
equivalency.
pay taxes.
Yeah.
You're forced to pay car insurance if you drive a car. You're forced to get health insurance under the ACA. You are forced to, well, for most people. You're like there are thousands of things you are forced to do in society. Most of them aren't even probably as necessary as taking a vaccine because vaccines save hundreds of thousands of people.
let's go to Nine Toast and Melly. And I'm not sure if Johnny had their hand up. Excuse me. Nine Toast.
Did I lose audio or did?
No, you're fine.
No, it was like
Everybody did.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So regarding what Josie said about like getting policy passed, I always find it a bit of like a personal victory once we've moved the goalposts to there. This is why I want a technocracy because we really can't we can't rely on this stuff at all. I think it's a bit of a luxury even to say like how do we get this passed? Like it's even if like we can't get it passed, the point is that we still like this is what would get rid of the virus, is not relying on people's need. Like people want to treat this like it's like their identity, like their identities are somehow wrapped up in this, and this is like the consumer market, when it's not. Like this is like literally our species surviving, and not like for an ethical purpose, not letting people die needlessly. So I don't think that like I'm going to say buying power here as like a metaphor, but I don't think buying power should dictate the the buy load of a virus in the public.
Melly, then Johnny.
I just wanted to point out. Hold on, sorry. I have really messy notes. Okay, so I was going to agree, like with Josie's point. I was thinking about what you said earlier, and I was like, how can we kind of like psychologically move like the society like to want to get the vaccine, and maybe like if we start doing like small things ourselves, like for example what Josie said is like, oh, if you don't have if you're not vaccinated, then like I'm sorry, but like I'm not going over to see you, like things like that to like get people to really look in themselves like, oh shit, like this is actually affecting like people like really close to me, and I don't want to sacrifice that, um and yeah, they people are tired of COVID, but they won't get the vaccine. But I also agree with Red Charlotte that like the rules should be made on the mass and not the outliers, so that's where this becomes like really tricky.
Go ahead, Johnny.
It's the same kind of like stuff that I oppose this opposition to like Pigovian taxes on, where it's like people like sugar taxes are bad because and like tobacco taxes are bad because it only hurts like poor people or whatever. And it's like, sure, but like the goal of the policy is to get less people to smoke and get less people to consume sugar. Most people are within the income range that they make up the most amount of people. And on net, it decreases sugar and tobacco consumption. So even if rich people can still smoke the same amount, the general, like the net effect on society is absolutely positive. So like this whole like it only hurts poor people. I don't buy this argument. It's like for me it's completely unsound.
All right, Charles, stick after if you can be part of the open panel. I'd love to engage a few more on
You're
this.
cutting in and out, Prime.
Am I? Sorry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
but
I don't know if you saw this on Twitter once. Like, just real quick, we don't have to get into it. It was just like a fun anecdote. Like on left Twitter, like a couple months ago, the big discourse was on the alcohol tax, right? And like left, like far left Twitter was like really like saying that this is like evil, like sin tax on poor people. When like the small tax we already have, right? Just by doubling it, you would decrease alcohol related deaths per year by 35%. That is tens of thousands of people. Mind you, like 50% of like violent crimes are like caused by alcohol. So like sounds good to me. Like
so I was saying, I'm not sure if you heard me before. I was saying to Red Charlotte that if you can stick around for the open panel, I'd like to engage a few more on this. But Johnny and then Alina.
Okay. So just like everything else in this country, vaccines and not taking vaccines now become pay to play. And I guess cool. Nah, this is, by the way, Charlotte, you could market this better. You know that, right? You're sitting here saying force people to take a vaccine. Call it an anti-vax tax. Like, call it something that actually describes what you want to do. Because when you say we're forcing people to take vaccines,
this is
people think,
this,
excuse me?
the language around it on a policy and like on an actual political level would be completely different to how we're talking about it on a like a
I
Discord panel.
don't see why. Why do you come on a panel with like hundreds of people watching and then not think about how well you're going to say something?
Because people understand that you can get at the truth of something before developing the
We
optics
really
for a
didn't,
political
because
plan.
Prime and I didn't even know what you wanted to do until Prime asked that very pertinent question about like, what is this actually going to look like? And you said it was going to be a tax. That looks completely different from what people assume. I'm just trying to help you. I'm not trying to like be a bitch or nothing.
The tax is only like an additive on being forced. The tax is just the like enforcement mechanism.
I'm not
Because
sure what you're saying. Again,
I don't think it's unclear when I say we should make vaccines mandatory. It's pretty clear.
no. What does that look like, babe? What do you do? What is that policy? Like, you can say a sentence.
Are you
What does
serious?
that look like? What
It
does
means
that look
it
like?
means you have to take the vaccine, or you will be legally
Or you get
punished.
fine, or you
Yeah, that's
get,
what it means to be forced
or
to do
somebody
something.
or somebody comes to your house and they like tell
We don't
you
do
that
this
you
for
have to
any
take
other
a
medical
vaccine.
procedure. You would just go to the doctor's office. What do you mean?
Just like tell me what you're talking about, dude. Like,
Like everyone in chat understands what I'm saying. This is just a you thing. Like,
okay, I'm just trying to clarify. Like, I'm not chat. I'm a person who's sitting here on a panel with you, and I'm trying to tell you I didn't understand what you wanted to do to
generally, if you
force
yeah,
people. Okay,
if you,
excuse me, you've interrupted me. To force people to take a vaccine. I don't think that it's so problematic that I'm like asking you to explain yourself and then telling you like, hey, if it's just a tax on people who don't want to take a vaccine, call it that. Okay?
this is literally just semantics. Like, it's the same thing.
I know. Like, why is
It's
semantics
just
such a problem?
wordplay. I feel
It's
like
just words. Like, you're getting your feelings hurt because you
It's the
think
same
that I'm
message.
you get your feelings hurt real quick because you think that I'm telling you you're wrong. I'm telling you you have a good idea and that you need to like be a little bit more open with how you want us to agree with you.
This is dumb. Like, this is
I
literally
guess.
just like tone policing. It's really
No,
annoying and
it's
obnoxious.
not your tone. I think
Tone policing doesn't literally mean like the tone of your voice. It's like how you're policing how someone is saying something instead
I'm
of
not policing it. I'm you
Oh,
don't have to do shit just because of me. You
what
don't
I
It's
have
a
to
it's
saw
do
was
it's a
shit.
just a
saying.
Like,
It's a saying.
misunderstanding with wordplay.
It's
That's it.
a
like it's
saying.
just
It
I
doesn't
just
mean. Oh my
babe.
god.
Oh, Charlotte, it's just wordplay. Mel is right. Like it's just wordplay. You don't have to be so upset about it.
mm,
Am I in an ESL call right now? Like, is that what's
What does
going on
that
right
mean?
now?
What? What does that mean?
ESL?
Like,
English learning a thing, I believe.
English second
right?
language. Like, are we
Yeah,
all speaking
bruh.
English right now? Do you like not understand the words
Are
coming out of my mouth? Like,
are you asking me if I'm stupid? Are you like
Yeah,
oh my
that's kind
god.
of.
that's kind
so
of rude.
okay, so I
Oh my.
think there was just a bit of a confusion there in terms
Wow.
of when I heard being forced. So I imagine, and maybe it was just, the
It was
blame is my
clearly
own,
just a misunderstanding.
being
No.
assuming that it
Yeah.
was talked about some
I
sort
just
of like
I just thought that you could use
carceral.
a better way to like tell us what you mean, and I was suggesting that. I wasn't trying to like be. I'm not. Wow. Okay, that
So
was
yeah,
weird.
When I brought up the phrase tone policing, you broke down the phrase into like the literal words and then the literal are you I
So,
don't know. Come on.
are
so
That's
you like?
obnoxious. I don't what the fuck?
I think
so
it's a
okay.
fair criticism. Hold on. I think it's a fair criticism. It's not tone policing. I think what it is like when you were trying to explain accuracy, because I also was confused when you said force. I actually thought like force as in like you're gonna go to jail or you're
Grabbing
gonna go.
people and
Yeah, you're gonna stab them with a needle,
Why
right?
would you think
Like
that if like all the other
because
things we do in
force.
society that you're forced to do usually don't incur jail time
It's the
anyway?
word force. It's pretty like a loaded term. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like you're using force against somebody, like you're forcing them and pushing. I feel like the word
Well,
has a lot
I
of.
also use the word mandatory. Like these words are synonyms. They all mean the same thing. Forced,
Yes.
mandatory,
There's
punished if you don't do it.
denotation and
Like,
connotation, though. Do you know what I mean?
oh
Like
my
there's the
Yeah.
literal
So
meaning, and then there's the
This is why
interpretive
I'm saying
meaning.
it's tone policing. Instead of arguing
it's
with the substance of what I'm saying, you're like saying that you should just say it differently. I
no,
don't.
it's definitions.
I'm not even arguing with you. I'm saying you were right, and then I thought it was a good
Whoa,
idea.
you're really.
And it made it better.
Whoa! You're really loud.
No, it was because they had not muted themselves. I mute you on stream. No,
Oh,
it's good.
thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, don't worry about it. Okay, sure. Ninetales.
Yeah, as someone who really does want to see people get forced, I don't think it has to be like going to jail and stuff. I think there can be a court order to get that someone has to get the vaccine, and the police can escort them to get the vaccine. I don't like the police just getting that right. Like just talking about possibilities here, but I don't think it has to be anything fancy. We could even bring it to them, I guess. Show up at the workplace like, hey, time for your vaccine, brah. but like overall, like the idea is to do whatever you can, put as much pressure on people to get the vaccine as possible instead of the opposite, or just less in general.
That seems worse than what Red Charlotte had proposed, right? Red Charlotte's just proposing a tax, and again, I feel like we just.
Yeah, I felt like she was getting a lot of undeserved attention when I'm right here.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, all right. Well then, yeah, I think once you introduce, if you're interested in police into the mix, and you understand this, Ninetales, if you introduce police into the mix, you're introducing violence into the mix, right? And
I admit it's not ideal. I'm just working from this point.
Sorry.
okay, go ahead, Lena.
So I don't know what exactly like where everybody lies on like the political spectrum here, right? I know we're all kind of like center, at least center to left, right? Like I guess like my issue is, do you not see a problem with the government having the power to like force people to take things, right? Even if like they don't want to. Like I kind of understand like what you're talking about with like you pay taxes, you do this, you do that. And like I understand that, but like I just feel like especially when it comes to medical things like this, like yes, the vaccine has proven to be safe and yes, millions of people have taken it and they're fine. It's just really it treads into some really weird government overreach territory that I as a libertarian I just don't feel comfortable with, right? I mean, I just don't feel comfortable with it. I took the vaccine, I'm fine with it, and I think people should take the vaccine. I just feel like we should take more cultural approaches rather than government approaches. And I think that would be a lot. I'm not saying like it would be more effective as in more people would take the vaccine because obviously if it were a forced vaccine or a mandatory vaccine then literally everybody would take it. I just think like optically and even like educating people on vaccines and things like that, I think it would be so much better, so much better. I mean, really, have you ever asked somebody to wear a mask? You literally get threatened as a service worker to be asked to put a mask on. Like I can't even like imagine it like at a government level, like like I said this before, but like the LARPing revolutionary types. Are you gonna just throw them in jail? Are you gonna just sick the police on them? Like I don't know. I don't like that idea. Like I just feel like it could be bad.
Like for real quick, like a historical example that we've already done this before with smallpox in 1853. They literally required universal vaccination against smallpox in England and Wales with a fine levied on people who didn't comply. And in the US, the Supreme Court ruled in Jacobson versus Massachusetts in 1905 that states have the authority to require vaccinations against smallpox during a smallpox epidemic. Like we've already done this before. Like it's why I don't know why it's so like insane of an idea to just do it again because it works.
Ninetales.
Yeah. So, am I mute? Okay. Wow, not muted for once. So, as much as I'd like it if changing things culturally or politically without using force made the virus go away, but it doesn't because the virus doesn't participate in those things. Only we do. And we're also the people who are spreading it. The only way we can actually prevent us from being spreaders and the virus from doing what it does is the vaccine, is to get people the vaccine. And so the only reason I'm taking a hard stance here is because this isn't the world I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world with lockdowns and social distancing and this stuff. I want to go back to normal. And I feel like the only way to do this to actually stop things in this track and not leave it up to things that just sound nice.